Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Midnight Stories. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be nice if everyone could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Alright, let's get comfy, relax, and begin. When I was around 10, there was this one night that still sticks with me. It was summer, and we were staying in my grandparents' place. That house was old but big, with a wide porch, a huge backyard, and enough space for all of us cousins to pile in without stepping on each other. That night, all the adults, our parents, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, had gone out to dinner together. They'd been planning it for a while, a kind of rare adult-only night, so they left us kids at the house. There were about 10 of us, all siblings and cousins, ranging from maybe 6 to 16 years old. The older ones were kind of in charge, but mostly we were just left to ourselves. We were all gathered in the living room. The TV was on, playing some movies. We had gone through a comedy and were halfway through an action movie when it happened. We had the lights off, snacks spread across the coffee table, and blankets thrown everywhere. It was loud in the way a room full of kids always is. Someone laughing too hard, someone shouting at the screen, someone whispering something to someone else, and giggling. It was just regular kid chaos. But then everything shifted. It started with this low rumble that seemed to come from the floor. At first, I thought it was something in the movie, but the floor actually shook under me. It wasn't huge like an earthquake, but it was strong enough to make the cups on the table rattle and the windows hum for a second. And then there was this flash, a blinding white flash like lightning, but brighter, and it came from the backyard. It lit up the entire living room for a split second like it was midday. Then the sound followed. It wasn't thunder. It was a boom, deep and sharp like something had exploded. The glass in the windows vibrated with it. My stomach dropped, and I remember jumping to my feet without even thinking. All of us screamed at the same time. Nobody had to say anything. We just ran. As one big clump, we bolted out of the living room and into the hallway. It was like pure panic. No one tripped or stopped. We just moved like animals when they get startled. The hallway was narrow and dark, and we packed into it, breathing hard. The older cousins stood in front of us, trying to figure out what to do. I remember how their faces looked, wide-eyed, pale, confused. One of them had their phone out and was saying they should call the police. Another said to wait and call the parents first. They argued quietly for a few minutes, but no one moved from the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wasn't even thinking about what it could be. I just knew something was wrong. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't fireworks. It didn't feel like anything we'd experienced before. It felt like something had gone wrong in the world, and we didn't know what it was. After maybe 10 minutes of standing there, still packed into that hallway like sardines, one of the older cousins finally stepped out and looked around. Nothing. The lights in the house were still on. Nothing else had shaken. There were no more sounds. But that tension, that raw fear, hadn't left us. Eventually, one by one, we followed back into the living room. This time we were cautious, moving slowly, scanning every shadow. Someone grabbed the fireplace poker. Another one picked up a tennis racket. My little brother clutched a kitchen knife he'd grabbed from the drawer. We didn't feel safe, but it felt worse just hiding in the hallway. We turned the lights on, locked all the doors and windows, and sat together on the floor instead of the couches, backs to the walls, facing the sliding glass door that looked out into the backyard. The curtains were still open, and the yard looked normal in the dark, silent, still, nothing out of place. But we all saw it. We all felt it. That boom wasn't imagined. That flash lit up the entire house. It wasn't a dream or a trick of the light. We started talking about it in hushed voices. One cousin said it might have been a transformer blowing up, but another pointed out there hadn't been a power outage. Everything still worked. Someone else said maybe it was a plane or something crashing nearby, but we would have heard more, sirens, people, something. There was nothing, just that one explosion of light and sound and then silence. We stayed like that for another half hour. None of us moved from that spot. Then the headlights of a car lit up the front window and we all jumped again. Our parents were back. They came in laughing and chatting, but when they saw us sitting on the floor with makeshift weapons and wide, terrified eyes, their faces changed. We tried to explain what had happened, how the house shook, the flash, the sound, but they didn't see anything. They stepped out into the backyard with flashlights and looked around. Nothing. The grass wasn't burned. There was no hole, no fallen tree, no signs of anything. The neighbors didn't say anything either. No one else in the area seemed to have seen or heard a thing. They told us we must have imagined it or exaggerated it because we were alone and watching loud movies. But we didn't imagine it. Not all 10 of us. We all reacted at the exact same moment. You don't run in terror from nothing. The next morning, we checked again. We walked through the backyard in daylight. It was completely normal. Nothing smelled burnt, nothing broken, no sign anything had happened. One of my older cousins joked that maybe it was aliens or something, but no one laughed. Years passed. We grew up, went to high school, college, moved on with life. But every time we're together, weddings, holidays, whatever, that night always comes up. Remember the boom? Someone will say, and we all go quiet for a moment. Every one of us still remembers it exactly the same. The rumble, the flash, the sound, the way we ran like a herd of animals. The way we couldn't explain it. Some of us have tried to find explanations over the years. Underground gas pockets, military testing, sonic booms, electrical issues, but nothing fits. There were no reports of anything happening that night in the area. We checked news sites, local reports, even Reddit forums. Nothing. It was like it never happened, except we all know it did. To this day, I've never felt fear like that again. I've had close calls, bad days, the usual stuff life throws at you, but nothing compares to that night. Because whatever it wasn't just scary. It was the complete unknown. And we were just kids sitting in a living room when the world cracked open for a moment and then slammed shut again without leaving a trace. That night still comes back to me sometimes, usually when it's dead quiet and I'm alone in a room. I remember how it felt when the floor shook and the windows buzzed and my brain screamed that something was happening, something I didn't understand. And the worst part is, there's no ending to it. No explanation. Just that moment, frozen in time, still as terrifying today as it was back then. Mount Hood had always felt like one of those safe places. It was close enough to home in Eugene to feel familiar, but far enough into the wilderness that it offered the kind of quiet you couldn't get in the city. Nate and I had driven up there for day hikes before, packed lunches, scenic views, a quick reset from normal life. But we never stayed overnight, never gone deep into the parts of the forest where the trail signs stopped showing up. When we saw the listing for the cabin, it felt like the perfect way to disappear for a few days. The ad described it as rustic, off-grid, surrounded by forest, with no neighbors for miles. The pictures were few, just a couple blurry shots of a small wooden structure half hidden by trees. It was cheap, almost too cheap, but we didn't ask too many questions. The owner only communicated through email. Short responses, just directions and a vague promise that everything we'd need would be there. His last message included a warning. We'd lose all cell service after rhododendron. That sounded perfect to us at the time. No calls, no work emails, no distractions. Just the two of us in the woods. We packed light, just enough food for a couple nights, warm clothes, flashlights, a small camp stove in case the wood-burning one didn't work. The drive was easy until we passed government camp. From there, the roads narrowed, the signs got more faded, and eventually we were on a dirt track so overgrown with weeds and low branches that we had to roll up the windows to stop them from whipping our faces. The path curved endlessly, going deeper into thick woods that didn't look like they'd been disturbed in years. After almost an hour of crawling forward in the car, we stopped. The road narrowed too much to drive any farther. We pulled over next to a cluster of thick, old-growth trees and got out. It was dead quiet. No wind, no birds. We had to walk the last stretch with our bags slung over our shoulders, stepping over roots and mud, pushing past saplings and hanging moss. When we saw the cabin, I remember my stomach tightening a little. I don't know why. It wasn't scary at first. Just wrong somehow. It looked even older than in the pictures. Heavy logs made up the walls, with moss climbing up from the earth halfway to the windows. The glass was dark, smeared with years of grime and maybe soot. There was a pump out front, rusted and leaning slightly to one side. The wooden steps to the porch creaked under our weight. Nate looked back at me, trying to be upbeat, keys in hand. When he opened the door, the air hit us immediately, damp, old, earthy like wet bark in forgotten spaces. It wasn't filthy inside, but it didn't feel lived in either. Everything was wood chairs, a table, a wide, old stove that smelled faintly of smoke. Heavy blankets were folded over the backs of chairs. On the table was a leather guest book, warped and spotted with mold. I flipped through it, pages sticking together. The most recent entry was dated July 1991. It was just a single sentence: "Enjoy your stay." There was nothing else. That night we sat out on the porch around a fire Nate had built in the stone ring outside. The sky turned deep blue, the stars starting to peek through. At first it was everything we hoped for. The wine warmed us, and the woods were quiet in that way that makes you feel like the only people left in the world. We were halfway through second glass when something shifted. I don't even remember what changed exactly. It might have been the way Nate suddenly stopped talking. I looked over and saw him staring toward the trees. His grip on the glass had gone tight, and he set it down slowly. He didn't say anything at first, just kept squinting toward the woods. Then he muttered, "Someone's out there." I turned and followed his gaze. At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight, a figure was standing. Not walking, not moving, just standing, too far away to make out anything but the outline. Human, upright, still. I remember my mouth went dry instantly. Nate stood up slowly and grabbed the flashlight, flicking it on and aiming it directly where the figure had been. There was nothing there. The trees looked empty. No sound, no movement, just the crackle of the fire and our own breathing. Neither of us spoke for a while. I think we both knew something wasn't right, but we were trying to stay calm, trying to rationalize it. By the time we went inside, locked the door, and pulled the old blanket over us in the bed, the sense of calm was gone. Every creak of the cabin made me sit up. Every gust of wind tapping branches against the roof made me think of footsteps. Nate didn't sleep either. I could hear his breathing all night. The next morning we pretended we were fine. We boiled water on the stove and made weak coffee. Nate walked out to the tree line where we'd seen the figure. He came back looking pale. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to show someone had stood there. We kept ourselves busy during the day, hiking small loops around the area, always staying within sight of the cabin. We didn't talk about the night before. That afternoon, we came across something strange. A thin wire, rusted and brittle, nailed into a tree about shoulder height. It disappeared into the brush on both sides. It looked old, like something from a different time. A boundary marker maybe, but for what, we didn't know. Nate stared at it longer than I did. On the way back, he kept looking over his shoulder. We lit the fire early that evening. Shadows crept up the trees fast. As the sun sank, the woods went dark faster than the night before. And then it happened again. The figure returned. This time, closer. Not at the tree line anymore. Maybe 70 yards away. Still not moving. Still watching. Nate had binoculars in the backpack. He pulled them out and looked through, holding them steady for a long time. When he handed them to me, he didn't say anything. My hands were shaking as I focused them. The figure was clearer now, dressed in something dark, the shape of a uniform, maybe tattered, dirty. Not military, not police, something older. And the way it stood, it was wrong. Too stiff, too deliberate. We agreed silently that we would leave at first light. We started packing as soon as it got light enough to see. Nate walked to the car ahead of me and opened the hood. I could tell something was wrong by the way he froze. The battery was dead, not from age or cold. The terminals were unscrewed. Someone had done it on purpose. Nate tried reconnecting it, but it was too drained. We had no choice. We had to walk out. We set out quickly, walking fast down the dirt road. After a while, we started noticing them, small piles of pine needles, perfectly spaced, every 50 feet or so, clean piles freshly stacked. We passed at least 10 of them. It wasn't random. It was a path, or a signal. We kept walking. Eventually, we found a sign nailed to a tree, old and almost unreadable. It said, "Do not trespass. Property of U.S. Forest Service. Site 17A." Neither of us had heard of that before. We stood there staring at it, trying to decide what to do. In the end, we turned back. Something about the sign felt wrong. It wasn't on any maps. The forest felt like it was closing in. That night back in the cabin, we didn't sleep. We heard scratching along the walls, slow dragging sounds. At one point, Nate looked out the side window and saw footprints in the dirt. Fresh ones. They led away from the house, heels deep like someone had stood there for a while. On the windowsill was an old Forest Service badge, rusted, placed there carefully. At dawn, we ran. We moved fast, barely stopping. Eventually, we saw headlights. A truck, Forest Service logo on the side. We sprinted toward it, waving our arms. The man who stepped out looked like he'd seen things. He didn't smile, just asked if we were lost. We told him about the cabin, the figure, the badge. He listened quietly, then told us the truth. The cabin hadn't been rented in over 30 years. It was condemned in 1992. A ranger named Jenkins had killed a couple he thought were trespassing, then killed himself. The site was never reopened. The badge matched the man from the photo he showed us. Nate and I sat silently in the truck, the weight of it all crashing down on us. We gave our statements. They said they'd investigate, but we knew they didn't believe us. Back home in Eugene, a few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was of Nate and me, taken through the cabin window. The angle was low, like the person had crouched just outside the glass. The caption below read, "Nice to finally see you up close." We moved a few months later, changed numbers, got a place in a city far from the woods. But I still don't sleep well, because whoever was out there, they weren't just watching. They're still watching. It's been 6 months since David died. Half a year of silence that felt louder than anything I'd ever known. Not the kind of silence where there's peace or space to think. It was the kind that buzzes in your bones, thick with all the words that never got said and all the ones we tried and failed to say. Chloe and I had barely spoken since the funeral. When we did, it felt like talking through a wall of static. David used to be the bridge between us. When he was around, he made everything easier. He had this way of laughing that disarmed everyone. He could make me loosen up and could get Chloe to come down from whatever cloud she lived on. With him gone, it was like two pieces of a puzzle that used to fit, just barely now couldn't even sit in the same box. I booked the cabin because I thought maybe we needed something neutral. Not our childhood home, not my apartment filled with blueprints and coffee cups, and not our messy studio filled with sculptures and charcoal sketches. Just something away from all of it. The Ozark National Forest seemed like a good idea when I clicked confirm on the booking. Somewhere honest, quiet, maybe in the woods, away from cell signals and memory triggers. We could start again. The road to the cabin was a winding, narrow thing, and the last stretch was barely passable. My sedan creaked over every bump. The red dirt kicked up behind us in long, dry plumes. Trees arched overhead, thick old oaks and hickories. They blocked out most of the afternoon light, so even though it was just after 4, everything looked dim and green and close. I gripped the wheel tighter than I needed to. My eyes scanned the woods, even though I didn't know what I was looking for. The GPS had lost signal 10 minutes ago, so I was relying on a set of printed directions the owner emailed me. A novelty these days. Chloe sat beside me, sketchbook on her lap, headphones in her ears. She hadn't looked up since we left the highway 2 hours ago. "Are we there yet?" she asked, her voice flat. She didn't pull out her earbuds. "Almost," I said. I tried to sound light. He said to look for a carved sign, "Still water." The cabin appeared suddenly, like it had been hiding until the last second. It sat in a rough clearing surrounded by trees that looked older than anything I'd ever seen. The building itself was small, smaller than the pictures made it seem. Dark logs stacked tight, chinked with crumbly gray mortar. It looked like it had been there forever. It didn't feel like someone built it. It felt like it had grown there. I got out of the car and walked a slow circle around it, my mind ticking away: roof slope, drainage issues, foundation. I couldn't help it. That's how my brain worked. Inside, the place smelled like smoke and wetwood. There was only one room, open and dark, with a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall. A tiny kitchen area in one corner, a couple of beds built into the walls, and a round wooden table in the middle. No TV, no microwave, no distractions. The windows were small and deep set, and the door creaked like something out of an old movie. I said, "Well, it's authentic," and ran a hand over the rough wood mantel. Chloe finally looked up. Her eyes, so much like David's, took in the room. She smiled a little, a faint thing, and whispered, "It's perfect." That first day was fine. We hiked one of the trails nearby, a 5-mile loop, mostly uphill. It was hot and steep and quiet. We didn't talk much, but we didn't fight either. At the top, there was a lookout point with a view that stretched across rolling green hills and valleys. She sat there, sketching the trees. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. That night, we made tea and sat on the porch. I expected the forest to be alive with sound, bugs, owls, whatever else lived out here, but around sunset, everything stopped. It was like someone hit mute on the whole world. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just this heavy, dense stillness. I tried to brush it off. The second night, it happened again. The stillness came earlier and heavier. We sat in the same chairs, cups of tea cooling in our hands. Then, from the woods, came a sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was slow, like stone dragging over stone. It moved from the edge of the trees along the clearing's edge. Deliberate, not hurried, like it knew exactly where it was going. And it didn't care if we heard it. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, something harmless. But that sound, stone on stone, it didn't fit. It didn't belong in the forest. That night, we locked the door and pushed a chair under the knob. Neither of us said it out loud, but we were scared. I slept in my clothes, flashlight in my hand. I didn't really sleep. On the third day, the air felt wrong. Heavy, charged. I couldn't focus on anything. Chloe didn't want to leave the cabin, and I didn't push her. But the stillness came early, and the scraping started again, earlier and louder. It wasn't at the edge of the woods anymore. It was in the clearing. Scrape, scrape. I grabbed the flashlight, told myself I needed to know what it was. I walked toward the tree line. The beam shook in my hand. At the edge of the clearing, I pointed the light at the ground and froze. 2 deep parallel gouges ran through the soil, a foot apart, cutting into the dirt and limestone. Fresh, like something with 2 massive, sharp, heavy limbs that dragged itself forward, then back. We didn't sleep that night. The scraping started again. Only this time, it came from the porch. Each scrape was louder, closer, vibrating through the floor. Then came a new sound, a low, grinding press against the logs of the cabin wall. Slow, testing, like it was figuring out how strong the structure was. I moved to the window. I looked. It wasn't an animal, not even close. It was huge, hunched, covered in what looked like wet black stones, moss, thick roots. No face, no eyes, no mouth, just this massive shape moving slow and heavy like a glacier. One of its limbs, a thick, jagged piece of rock, dragged across the wood. Deliberate, like it was thinking. I backed away, then it moved to the door. The first push was soft, just enough to make the hinges groan. Then harder. Wood cracked. Dust fell from the beams. Chloe remembered something. The map. There was a fire tower miles away. The old logging trail ran from near our cabin out to it. If we could get there, we'd be high off the ground. Visible, maybe even reachable by radio. We used the noise at the front door to cover our escape. The kitchen window was stuck, but we forced it open. Chloe went out first. Then I followed. We didn't look back. We ran. The forest was pitch black. We tripped, fell, got back up. I twisted my ankle. Sharp pain lanced up my leg, but I didn't stop. We found a trail by luck. 2 faint grooves in the earth, mostly overgrown. But they were there. We followed them. For hours, we ran. And then we saw it. A shape against the early dawn sky. Thin and metal. The fire tower. We climbed. The steps groaned. One slipped under me. I nearly fell. But we reached the top. We got inside. And we waited. The sun rose. And with it came the sounds of the forest. Birds. Wind. Insects. It was the most beautiful noise I'd ever heard. That day, we made the decision. We weren't going back to the cabin. Not for our things. Not for the car. Nothing was worth walking through those woods again. We followed the trail to the road. Hours later, a ranger picked us up. We said a bear destroyed the cabin. He nodded, took notes, dropped us off in town. We left Arkansas that same day. We never heard from the sheriff. Now, months later, Chloe is working again. She makes strange welded sculptures that don't look like anything you'd put in a gallery, but they're hers. I'm back to designing buildings. Steel, concrete, things that make sense. We talk now, but we never talk about that night, because we know what we saw, and we know it's still out there, waiting, still, silent, just beyond the edge of the clearing. Years ago, I was hauling a load of scrap metal through Oklahoma, headed westbound toward Amarillo. I've been driving for about 11 hours straight, and I was dead tired. The air was thick, the kind of summer night where the heat doesn't break even after sundown. I didn't want to stop at a truck stop. It was late, past 2 a.m., and the next big one was still over an hour out. So when I saw the faded sign for a closed-down gas station a mile ahead, I figured it was good enough for the night. I eased off the highway, followed a gravel road, and pulled into the lot. The place looked like it hadn't pumped gas in 20 years. The canopy was rusted, the sign had no letters on it, and the windows of the little building were boarded up. But the lot was wide open, enough room for me to park the rig without worrying about backing into something. I left the engine idling for a few minutes to let the AC blow cold one last time, then killed it and climbed into the sleeper cab. It was quiet out there. No wind, no bugs, not even the usual crickets you'd expect. I cracked the window a little to let some air in and laid back, tried to rest. I must have dozed off for a bit, because the next thing I remember was waking up to a sound. A knocking, faint but steady. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, still half asleep, listening. At first, I thought it was the wind against the trailer wall, but it was too rhythmic. It didn't sound like something hitting metal from the side. It sounded like it was coming from beneath me. I opened the cab door, slid out barefoot onto the ground, and stood still. The knocking came again. Louder now. I walked slowly around the side of the trailer, holding my flashlight. I'd had run-ins with stray dogs, raccoons, once even a possum tangled in the airlines. Figured it was something like that. I crouched down and flicked the light underneath. And that's when I saw them. Bare feet. Human. They were just sticking out from behind the rear axle. Heels on the gravel, toes dirty and scraped up. My stomach dropped. I stood up fast and called out, just a loud hey. But there was no answer, no movement. I walked toward the back of the trailer, shining the light steadily. I slowed down when I got to the tires. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 13, 14 at most, curled up tight against the underside of the trailer. She had long, tangled hair, no shoes, just a big t-shirt that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. Her eyes were wide and locked onto mine, like she didn't know if I was friend or threat. I didn't know what to say. Before I could think of anything, she whispered something. I couldn't hear it first. I had to lean in closer. She said, "He's coming. Please don't tell him I'm here." My body went cold. That kind of cold that doesn't come from outside. It's something deeper. I looked around quickly, sweeping the flashlight toward the edges of the lot. The place was surrounded by tall grass and a line of trees about 30 yards back. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not close, but moving fast. Through the brush. I snapped the light in that direction, but I couldn't see anything, just the shifting black between the trees. I didn't ask questions. I reached under, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her out. She didn't fight me. She just stumbled a little as I lifted her up and practically shoved her toward the cab. I opened the passenger door and got her inside. She curled up tight against the far door, eyes wide, not saying a word. I jumped into the driver's seat, fired the engine, and threw it into gear. I didn't even look back. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the engine roar. I turned the truck around and bounced out of the gravel lot, back onto the road. I didn't stop driving until I hit the next town, which was about 30 minutes out. It felt like 3 hours. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner that was just starting to open for the morning. I parked the rig and sat there for a second, breathing heavy. She was still curled up, staring at the glove box. I could see in the rearview mirror that my hands were shaking. Inside the diner, I found the manager and asked if I could use the phone. I called the cops, told them what happened, gave the exact location of a gas station, and stayed on the line until a cruiser showed up. They took her in gently, wrapped her in a blanket someone at the diner had found in a back closet. I gave my statement. They asked a lot of questions. I answered what I could. I asked the officer quietly what would happen to her. He just looked at me for a second and said, "You probably save her life tonight." A few days later, I got a call from one of the investigators. They'd looked into it. The girl had run away from a truck stop 2 states over, near Arkansas. She'd escaped a man who'd been picking up runaways, hitchhikers, and kids with nowhere to go. He'd been moving them along the interstates, keeping them hidden in trailers and back rooms at small-town motels. The kind of guy who knew how to disappear. They caught him a week later. He was staying at a cheap motel just off I-40, not far from where I found her. When they got him, he had 2 more kids with him. I don't know what happened to the girl after that. I didn't ask. Figured she had enough people digging in her life. I just hoped she ended up somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. I thought about her a lot on the road after that, especially when I'd park overnight. I'd check under the trailer every time, not because I was scared, because I hoped I'd never find anything like that again. I got to the Airbnb in Bumpik, Kansas around midnight. I'd been driving all day, and my GPS had taken me off the main highway a few hours back, winding me through endless stretches of flat, empty farmland. I was exhausted by the time I pulled into the gravel driveway. The house was small, looked like it had been there for decades, and sat alone on a plot of land that stretched out forever in every direction. The only other house I remembered passing was about half a mile back, maybe more. No streetlights out there, and no cell service for the last 30 minutes. The Airbnb listing had said, "Cozy farmhouse on quiet land," and it was only $12 for the night. I was just passing through and needed somewhere cheap to crash. At the time, it felt like a steal. The host had messaged earlier that she'd be asleep by the time I got there, but the front door would be unlocked. I parked near the front steps and killed the engine. The second the headlights went out, I realized just how dark it was. Pitch black. Not even a moon that night. I stood outside the car for a second before heading in, and the silence was unnerving. No wind, no crickets, just stillness. My footsteps on the porch sounded like gunshots in the quiet. I let myself in and clicked on the flashlight on my phone. The living room was small, with wooden floors that creaked under every step. There was a couch in the corner with a blanket and pillow laid out for me. I could tell she prepared it, but the room felt weird, like it wasn't meant for sleeping. The furniture was mismatched, like things collected from yard sales and flea markets. And everywhere I looked, there were shelves covered with small objects, rocks, feathers, coins, jars filled with sand or water, little wooden boxes, glass beads. I didn't know what half of it was. At first, I thought it was just a quirky decorating style, maybe someone who liked to travel and collect things. But the more I looked, the stranger it got. There were books stacked in uneven piles, most of them old and worn. A few had titles I recognized about crystals, energy healing, astrology, but others were odd. One was called Celestial Law and Cosmic Government. Another had a hand-drawn cover with a spaceship and something that looked like scripture in a language I didn't recognize. There was a tapestry on one wall, pale purple and blue, with symbols stitched into it. I didn't know what it said, but one word stood out, Zerial. I didn't want to mess with anything, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out my phone and typed the word into Google. The results were surprisingly specific. Zerial was the name of a spiritual belief system that centered around UFOs. Not just aliens, but UFOs themselves being holy. The main text of the religion wasn't a spiritual book in the normal sense. It was a catalog of different types of spaceships, categorized and labeled like a field guide. Some were supposedly manned by beings of light. Others were described as scouts, harvesters, or watchers. I felt this weird combination of unease and fascination. I wasn't scared exactly, just unsettled. Everything felt just a little off. Not dangerous, but strange. I sat down on the couch and tried to get comfortable, but every time I closed my eyes, I thought about the silence outside. That kind of silence doesn't exist where I'm from. Even at night, there's some background noise. Out here, it was like the world had paused. I couldn't sleep, so I kept looking around the room. On the coffee table was an old leather-bound journal. I knew I shouldn't read it, but it wasn't hidden. It looked like it had been left there intentionally. I picked it up and opened it to the middle. The writing was neat, loopy cursive, clearly the same hand throughout. It read like a travel diary, with dates and locations: Mexico, Egypt, Peru, Arizona. One entry caught my eye. The writer had gone to Peru and claimed to have seen a spacecraft land near a mountain. She described the way it moved, how the air felt heavy and electric, and how the craft didn't make any sound. She wrote that she'd seen UFOs before, but never one that close. The way she described it wasn't like someone telling a story. It read like someone documenting a real event. And she wasn't dramatic about it. It was written so plainly, it almost felt more believable because of that. Eventually, I forced myself to lay down and try to sleep. I kept the blanket up to my chin and kept glancing at the front door, half expecting someone to walk in. But nothing happened, just silence. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up to lights spilling through the windows and the smell of coffee. The host was in the kitchen. I hadn't seen her the night before, but she was a short woman in her 60s, thin, wearing a long cardigan over a nightgown. She waved to me when I sat up. She didn't seem surprised I was already awake. I got up and followed the smell of coffee. The kitchen was just as cluttered as the living room, with herbs hanging from the ceiling, more crystals on the shelves, and a corkboard filled with printed out articles and maps with pins in them. She handed me a mug of coffee and smiled. Her eyes were kind, clear, and sharp. We sat at the small, round kitchen table, and without me asking anything, she started talking. She talked about the religion, about how everything we know about life is wrong, about the ships she believed protected the earth. She told me that tornadoes weren't random, but orchestrated by governments as part of weather manipulation programs. She talked for almost an hour, going from topic to topic. She wasn't pushy, just passionate. She never asked me if I believed her, and she didn't seem to care if I did. She gave me a folder of papers to read on the road and a free copy of the Airbnb magazine. Before I left, she hugged me gently and said she hoped I'd think about what she'd shared. I nodded, thanked her, and walked back to my car. It was daylight now, but somehow it still felt a little eerie, like the place had its own atmosphere. I drove away down the gravel road, and the farmhouse got smaller in my rearview mirror until it disappeared. I didn't see another car for nearly 30 minutes. I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs, some great, some sketchy, but nothing like that. I don't think she was dangerous, and I don't think she meant any harm. But there was something about being so isolated, surrounded by beliefs that felt like they belonged to a different reality, that stuck with me. The silence, the symbols, the journal, the way she looked at me like she knew something I didn't, it all stayed in my head for a long time. Sometimes I still think about that journal entry, the one about the spaceship in Peru. I wonder if she really saw something, or just believed she did so deeply that it became her truth. Either way, I don't think I'll ever forget that night in Bumpit, Kansas. And even though nothing bad happened, I still triple-check the listings now before I book anything, especially if it's too cheap to make sense. I was driving down Route 50 through Nevada, sometime after 11 p.m. The road was dead quiet. They call it the loneliest road in America, and it lived up to the name. I'd been behind the wheel for hours, just endless stretches of darkness broken by my headlights. No gas stations, no houses, no lights in the distance. Nothing but scrubland and desert on either side. The only sound in the car was the low hum of the tires and the occasional rattle from the glove compartment. The air felt dry and cold, and I kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the heater vent. The road just kept going, a straight, empty line stretching ahead into the black. Around midnight, I noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I was almost relieved. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and something about another set of headlights made me feel like I wasn't entirely alone out there. But something started to feel off pretty quickly. The vehicle was a beat-up old sedan. Hard to tell the exact make from the lights and shape, but it looked low to the ground and kind of dented up. The strange part was that it stayed right behind me. Same distance, same speed, never trying to pass. Just far enough back to avoid my brake lights fully lighting up its windshield. I slowed down a little, just to see if it would go around. It slowed down too. That's when I really started paying attention. I nudged the accelerator, sped up to about 70. It kept pace. I pushed it to 75, then 80. Still there. There was no one else around. No lights, no signs, no exits, nothing. Just me in this car that seemed to have decided it was going to stick to me like glue. My hands were tighter on the steering wheel now, eyes flicking from the road to the mirror more than I liked. I kept telling myself maybe they were nervous too. Maybe they didn't want to be alone out here, and following someone made them feel safer. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, the longer they stayed behind me, the worse the feeling got. I kept thinking they'd get bored or turn off. Maybe they'd take an unmarked side road, or pull over to pee or swap drivers, or whatever. But no, mile after mile, they just followed. I started to feel the pressure in my chest, like I was being watched, like something wasn't quite right. After about 20 more minutes of this, I decided to test something. I put on my turn signal and started to slow down like I had a flat. I pulled to the side of the road, gravel crunching under the tires as I came to a stop. My hazard lights ticked on. The sedan kept coming, its headlights bright as ever. I could see it clearer now, dented hood, one headlight slightly out of alignment. The driver didn't stop, but right as it passed me, the car's headlights suddenly turned off. No brake lights, no tail lights, just gone. But the car didn't stop moving. It kept rolling down the road, slowly, maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour, coasting past me and into the dark like something in a dream. Just the silhouette of that messed up sedan against the moonlit road. I sat in my car, engine running, hazards clicking steadily. 10 minutes passed, maybe longer. I kept looking down the road, expecting to see those headlights flicker back on. Maybe waiting for the driver to reverse, or pull over up ahead, or something. But nothing happened. No light, no engine sounds, no brake lights in the distance. Just stillness. My mouth was dry, and I could feel the thump of my heartbeat in my ears. I turned off the hazards and sat there in silence, hand resting on the gear shift. I thought about staying put until sunrise, but the idea of just sitting there, vulnerable, made my skin crawl. If they were trying to scare me, they'd done it. And if it wasn't a prank, then I didn't want to be parked out here in the middle of nowhere while whoever that was waited up ahead. So I eased back onto the road, slowly at first, then picked up speed. No sign of the car, not even tire tracks in the dust. I drove faster, my eyes locked on the road, mirrors checked constantly. Still no sign. I pushed the car harder than I ever had. I don't know how long I drove at 90, maybe more. Every slight bump made the wheel tremble. I kept expecting to see them parked on the side or crawling up behind me again, but nothing. For the next hour, it was back to how it was before, just empty road, darkness on both sides, and the hum of the tires. Eventually, the sky started to lighten. Faint pink and gray, just barely touching the horizon behind me. I didn't feel relief exactly, but the daylight made it a little easier to breathe. Around 6 a.m., I finally rolled into a small town, gas station, diner, a couple of motels. I pulled into the first place with a lit sign and parked in the corner of the lot, engine still running. I just sat there for a while, staring at the sky getting brighter. I never saw the sedan again. Never saw it parked on the side of the road. Never passed it pulled over anywhere, never caught another glimpse of those lights. I checked the local news later, tried to find anything. Maybe a stolen car report, maybe a warning about a prowler or road scam, something. But nothing came up. To this day, I don't know who was in that car or what they wanted. Maybe it was some unhinged loner playing a game. Maybe someone trying to mess with people on that stretch of road just to get a thrill. Or maybe they were planning something worse and I just didn't give them the chance. But I never drove that route again. And if I ever have to, I won't do it at night. I had never used Airbnb before that trip. Normally I booked hotels, but with the equestrian event coming up in Lexington and so many of us traveling, me, my daughter, 3 of her friends, and my mom, I figured it would be more comfortable and maybe cheaper to rent a house. The listing seemed perfect. It was a clean, decent-sized single-family home in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. and the host, a woman named Rosanna, had solid reviews. We were only staying a few nights, and everything about the booking process was smooth. I didn't think I had any reason to be worried. Our flight came in late. It was already dark by the time we got to the house, probably close to 11. I drove the rental car from the airport, and as we pulled into the neighborhood, it was mostly quiet, just a few porch lights on, not many cars out. The houses were spaced apart, nothing too fancy. I remember noticing how quiet everything was, eerily quiet for a Friday night. When we pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed something strange. The front door was wide open, not just unlocked, not cracked, but actually swung all the way open. The glass storm door behind it was shut, which almost made it look like the front door had been yanked open from inside and left that way. That felt wrong. The garage code had worked, and that's how we were supposed to enter. I didn't understand why the front door would be open like that. I parked the car and told everyone to wait outside while I went in to check things. I'm not someone who panics easily, but I was cautious, especially with the girls there. I walked in slowly, calling out into the house just in case. It was dark and cold inside. All the lights were off. The layout was simple. A small living room, a hallway that led to 3 bedrooms, a kitchen off to the left, and a door leading into the garage. Everything seemed untouched, like no one had been there. I checked every room. No signs of anyone hiding, nothing out of place. No broken glass, no muddy footprints, nothing. I went back outside, told the girls and my mom that it looked fine inside, and we all brought our bags in. Everyone was a little uneasy, but we were tired from the flight, and it was late. I locked the front door this time and double-checked that all the windows were closed. I remember that clearly. I walked through each room myself, making sure the latches were secure. I didn't want to take any chances. The next day went by without incident. We went to the competition grounds, had dinner in town, and came back around 8:30. The girls were still full of energy, laughing and playing music while they hung out in the living room. My mom and I unpacked a little and started getting ready for bed. Everything seemed okay. I still had that weird feeling from the night before, but there hadn't been any actual sign of trouble, so I tried to ignore it. Around 11:30, one of the girls walked into the hallway and told me that her window was open. She wasn't sure if she'd accidentally opened it earlier, so I went to check it myself. Not only was her window unlocked, but it was pushed open a few inches. It hadn't been like that earlier. I was sure of it. I called my mom over and we checked the other windows in the same room. Same thing. Both of them were slightly cracked and definitely unlocked. That didn't make any sense. None of the girls had gone into that room during the day except to drop off their bags, and I had personally locked those windows the night before. We started going room by room again. The kitchen windows were open, the ones in the living room too, even the tiny one in the bathroom. All of them were unlatched and cracked in exactly the same way, about 2 or 3 inches open, just enough that someone could maybe slip fingers in and push them up more easily. I felt my stomach drop. None of the windows were broken. Nothing had been forced. The locks had just been undone. But we'd only been using the garage to come in and out. No one had touched the front door since the night we arrived, and we certainly hadn't opened any windows. I couldn't figure out how it had happened. Either someone had been in there while we were gone, or worse, someone had stayed behind after we arrived. We all started to panic a little. The girls were asking a million questions, and I was trying to stay calm for their sake. I told them to get their stuff together in case we needed to leave. I pulled the garage door shut and locked it, just trying to keep control of something. Then I walked to the front of the house and peeked out the living room window. That's when I saw it. There was a car parked across the street, just sitting there. It hadn't been there when we pulled in. All the windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside, but it was just sitting there running. No one got out. No headlights. Just idling completely still. I didn't move, just watched it. After maybe 5 seconds, the engine revved slightly, and then the car peeled away down the road. That was enough. I called 911 right then. A deputy showed up about 10 minutes later. He walked through the house with me, checked the windows, doors, garage. He didn't find any signs of forced entry either. No fingerprints, no scuff marks, nothing. But he didn't try to pretend I was overreacting either. I could tell from the way he was looking around that he felt it too. Something was off. He told me that he couldn't say for sure what was happening, but if it were his family, he wouldn't stay the night there. That was all I needed to hear. He waited while we packed everything up. The girls were scared, my mom too, but we moved fast. We didn't even bother unpacking the rest of our stuff, just threw everything into bags and got out. I booked a hotel downtown while we were still in the driveway. When we were leaving, the officer pulled me aside. He said he couldn't prove anything, but based on the window patterns, the unlocked door, the car, and the fact that it all happened the night after we'd arrived, he believed someone had planned to come back after we went to bed. He didn't say it directly, but I knew what he was thinking. Somebody might have been waiting to take the girls. That thought haunted me the whole night. I messaged the host, Rosanna, and told her everything. She seemed surprised and just said something like, "Oh my gosh," but didn't offer much else. I tried contacting Airbnb too, but they never got back to me in a real way. No follow-up, no investigation, nothing. Just an automated message saying they'd look into it. The girls ended up competing fine the next day, but none of us slept much that night. Even in the hotel, we kept the lights on and took turns staying awake. I kept thinking about those windows and that car. The way everything had been so carefully left just slightly open. It was like someone had planned it. Like someone knew exactly when we'd be gone and when we'd be back. And if that girl hadn't noticed her window, I still think about what might have happened. I've never booked another Airbnb since. I don't think I ever will. It was around 3 a.m., and I was driving north through rural Michigan. I'd been on the road for a few hours, trying to make it to Petoskey before morning. I don't usually drive that late, but I had a late start leaving Detroit, and I figured I'd rather drive through the night than deal with morning traffic. The roads were empty, just 2 lanes cutting through endless trees, and barely a street light to be seen after midnight. I had the windows cracked open a little to keep myself awake, and the cold night air helped. So did the radio, even though it kept fading in and out the farther I got from civilization. I hadn't seen another car in maybe half an hour when it happened. I came around a gentle bend in the road, and suddenly my headlights lit up a man standing dead center in the lane. He wasn't wearing reflective gear, no flashlight, nothing, just jeans, a dark jacket, and his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. I had maybe 3 seconds to react. I swerved hard to the right, tires kicking up gravel as I crossed over the shoulder. My heart slammed into my chest, and I honestly thought I clipped him, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was still standing there, completely still, like he hadn't even flinched. I slowed down for a few seconds, watching him fade in the mirror, half thinking maybe I should turn around, maybe he needed help or something. But there was something about the way he stood there, just watching, not even moving a muscle, not even looking scared that a car nearly hit him. I shook it off, figured maybe he was drunk or high and wandered into the road from somewhere. Not my problem. I kept going. Not even a full minute later, I saw him again. Same posture, same jacket, same guy, standing right in the middle of the road again like he'd been teleported there. Same dead expression, hands in his pockets, nothing around him. No Daiwa, no side roads, no sign of headlights behind me where he could have come from. Just trees and darkness. I slammed the brakes, harder this time. My tires squealed, and I felt the whole car jolt. I didn't stop completely, but I dropped to a crawl. He was looking straight at me, face blank, like he wasn't seeing me at all. Just standing there. I swerve around him again, this time keeping more distance, wheels bumping over the shoulder, then sped up without looking back. My brain started racing. Was I overtired? Seeing things? I sat up straighter in the seat, blinked hard, checked my side mirrors, even rubbed my eyes a little, trying to shake off the feeling. But no, I saw him both times. It wasn't a hallucination. I couldn't make up that much detail. It was the exact same guy. Same look, same stance. I felt a knot start tightening in my gut. There was nothing around me. No lights, no houses, no stores. Just dark woods and road. The GPS didn't show any towns nearby, and I hadn't passed anything open for miles. The phone had barely 1 bar. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping anywhere out there felt worse than just driving faster. I kept the speed at around 70, trying not to look in the mirrors too much. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, maybe a weird stretch of road, maybe some messed up twins playing a prank, though that didn't really make any sense either. But I needed to believe something normal, because the other possibility, the idea that something was seriously wrong out there, wasn't something I wanted to think about. 15 minutes passed, then 20. No sign of him. No more people on the road. I was just starting to convince myself I'd imagined it or misunderstood what I saw. Maybe it wasn't even the same guy. Maybe the first one turned around and walked back or something when I crested a hill, and there he was again. Dead center in the lane. Same man. Same posture. Same face. Hands still in his pockets. Eyes locked on my car. I felt my breath catch. This time I didn't slow down. I floored it. Swerved hard around him without lifting my foot off the gas. The whole car shook as I barely stayed on the shoulder, gravel pinging against the underside. I checked the mirror again, and this time I saw him turn his head slowly to watch me go by. I drove faster after that. My palms were sweating, and I kept wiping them on my jeans. I didn't know what to think anymore. My brain kept trying to line things up and find something normal to explain it, but nothing fit. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me that fast. There were no cars on the side of the road, no cut-throughs or shortcuts, just 2 lanes and black forest. I kept driving like that for another half hour, nerve shot, every muscle in my arms and back tensed. Every time I rounded a corner or went over a hill, I braced myself to see him again. But I didn't, not for a while. Finally, after what felt like forever, I started seeing signs for a small town, Cross Village. I'd been aiming for Petoskey, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to be around people. I needed streetlights and gas stations and cell service. Anything but more trees and that silent man in the road. When I hit the edge of the town, I almost laughed from relief. A blinking yellow light at a 4-way stop. A closed gas station. Houses. Driveways. Street signs. It looked like heaven. I pulled into a small diner parking lot, even though it was closed. I just needed to sit somewhere that wasn't the middle of nowhere. I turned off the engine and sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty sidewalk. The sky was just starting to lighten in the east. I waited until the sun was fully up before I left that lot. I drove the rest of the way in daylight, and I didn't see him again. I never figured out who he was or how he kept getting ahead of me. I checked the news the next day, looked online, searched for reports of a man hit on that road, or people playing pranks, or any explanation at all. There was nothing. No missing persons. No accidents. No other drivers reported anything strange. But I know what I saw. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't dreaming. He was real. He was there more than once, standing in the exact same spot, miles apart, without ever seeming to move. It still gets to me. Every time I drive alone at night, especially through wooded areas, I think about that man. I keep checking the road ahead, just a little more than I used to. And I never, ever take those lonely back roads anymore. Not even if GPS tells me to. It was around 2 a.m. when I pulled off the highway in West Texas. I'd been driving for hours, trying to get to El Paso by sunrise. The road had gone pitch black for miles. Just me, the rumble of the tires, and the occasional jackrabbit darting across the asphalt. I was low on gas, and the warning light had been on for longer than I was comfortable with. When I finally saw the flickering green and red lights of a gas station sign in the distance, I felt a small wave of relief. The place looked old, run down, the kind of place that probably hadn't been renovated since the 80s. A single gas pump stood crooked under a rusted awning. The store behind it was dimly lit, its front window covered with yellowed flyers and faded advertisements for lottery tickets and Marlboros. There wasn't another car in sight. I pulled in, left the engine running, and stepped out to pump gas. The wind was dry and warm, sweeping dust across the lot. Crickets chirped somewhere out in the brush, but otherwise, it was dead silent. After filling the tank, I figured I'd grab a bottle of water and maybe something sugary to keep me awake for the rest of the drive. The door creaked loudly as I walked inside. The clerk was a middle-aged guy, slouched behind the counter. He looked like he'd been asleep seconds before I came in, eyes half-lidded, slow to focus. He didn't say a word, just nodded once and looked back down at whatever was on the counter, maybe a magazine or a radio. I walked the short aisles, grabbed a bottle of water and a candy bar, and walked up to pay. The transaction was quick, silent, and awkward. I thanked him, even though he didn't seem to hear me, and pushed the door open again. I was about halfway across the lot when I saw him. There was a man standing beside the driver's side door of my car. He wasn't there when I went in. I know for a fact. I would have seen him. The gas station lights weren't bright, but they were enough to see the area around the pump, and there's no way I could have missed someone just standing there. He was tall. Not huge, just tall. Wearing a dark hoodie, jeans. His hood was up, hands at his sides. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was looking right at me, the way people do when they've been waiting. I stopped, just froze. He didn't move for a second, then slowly raised one hand and held something up. "You dropped your wallet," he said. My stomach turned cold. My instincts kicked in. I reached behind me, patted my back pocket. My wallet was there, firm and flat where it should be. I didn't say anything, didn't nod, just stood there, eyes locked on the thing in his hand. He smiled, small and subtle. Then he stepped forward, real casual, and placed whatever he was holding gently on the hood of my car. After that, he turned and walked off into the dark, past the edge of the lot, toward the empty road and the desert beyond. No car, no bike, just walked. I didn't move until he was out of sight. Then I looked at what he'd left behind. It wasn't a wallet. It was a baseball cap, old, sun-bleached red, the white threads frayed along the edges. The bill was bent nearly in half from age or maybe habit. What made my stomach twist was the dark brownish stain along the rim, dried blood, old enough to have soaked deep into the fabric. And on the inside of the cap, written in faded black marker, was a name. First name only, Corey. I stood there a minute longer, heart pounding hard in my chest. The wind kicked up a little, tossing grit into my eyes. I blinked, looked around the lot again, but there was no sign of him. No figure walking in the distance. No movement in the shadows. Nothing but flat land, cactus, and darkness. I didn't want to touch the hat. I didn't want to get back in the car either, but I had to. I wasn't staying another minute at that gas station. I walked wide around the driver's side, keeping my eyes on the shadows, opened the door quickly, and slid in. Locked it immediately. Then I just sat there for a moment, staring out through the windshield at the cap on my hood. I wanted to drive off, but the thought of that thing flying up and hitting my windshield made my skin crawl. So I got out again, quick and tense, walked around to the front, grabbed the hat by its very edge, and flung it into the trash can near the pump. I didn't check to see if it made it all the way in. I didn't care. I jumped back in the car, slammed the door, and sped out of there faster than I probably should have. Back on the highway, I kept checking my rearview mirror, but no car showed up behind me. No headlights. No sign of the man. Still, something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake it. About 10 miles down the road, I saw flashing lights up ahead. Red and blue. A sheriff's SUV and a couple of highway patrol cruisers were parked just off the shoulder. One officer was placing cones. Another was talking to a man sitting on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. I slowed down as I passed and saw a car off in the ditch, crumpled hood, windshield shattered. Looked like it had rolled. I considered pulling over, telling them what happened, but what would I even say? Some guy tried to hand me a bloody hat and walked off into the desert? That wasn't a crime, just creepy as hell. I kept going. When I got to El Paso around sunrise, I pulled into a motel lot and parked. I was too wired to sleep, too tired to think. So I sat there a while, letting the engine tick as it cooled, watching the sky lighten from black to dusty purple. Out of curiosity, I pulled out my phone and looked up anything I could find about missing people named Corey in West Texas. Nothing popped up immediately. Too vague. But I did find an old news article from a local outlet dated 2 years back. The story was short, buried behind a paywall, but the visible preview mentioned a young man named Corey, last seen at a gas station near I-10, west of Fort Stockton. His car was found abandoned. No foul play suspected. No updates since. I don't know for sure if that hat was his. I'll never know what that man wanted. Maybe it was some sick prank. Maybe he thought he could scare me into getting out of the car. Or maybe he wanted something worse. I've thought about it 100 times, replayed the way he moved, the way he smiled. I don't think he was trying to help me. That wasn't the look someone gives when they're doing a good deed. It was more like he was watching a reaction he'd seen before. Like he'd done it before. I still drive late at night sometimes. Can't always avoid it. But I don't stop at those empty gas stations anymore. I fill up before dark, stay on busy routes when I can. And if I see someone near my car when I come back out, I don't talk, I don't ask, I get in and drive. Because sometimes it's not ghosts or monsters you need to be afraid of. It's just people. I had booked a small, older-looking Airbnb in Iowa for my little brother's graduation. He didn't know I was coming, so we were planning to surprise him. The house itself looked like it was built maybe in the 50s or 60s, a little weathered but well kept. It sat in a quiet neighborhood that felt a little too still, even during the daytime. Big trees out front with overgrown roots pushing up the sidewalk, a screen door that squeaked every time it moved. Nothing special, just a small family home converted into a short-term rental. My girlfriend and I arrived the night before the party to set everything up, and my older brother showed up that morning with decorations and food. While we were getting everything ready, we realized we needed one more folding table. The host had mentioned in a message that there were extras in the basement. My brother and I headed down together. The basement door was tucked behind the kitchen, with a skinny, creaky staircase leading down. Right away, as soon as we opened the door, there was this smell, not mold or mildew exactly, but like dust and something old. The air felt heavy, like it had been closed off for too long. Neither of us said anything at first, but once we got down the steps and stood there looking around, we glanced at each other and just nodded. It was weird, the kind of weird that sticks to you. The lighting was dim, even with the single bulb flicked on, and the corners of the room felt darker than they should have. A lot of shadows. We found the table leaning against the far wall and carried it up together, laughing a little to shake off the tension. It was just a basement. Old house, old basement. But the feeling never really left. Later that day, guests started showing up. My little brother walked in with his girlfriend and immediately got caught up in the surprise. It went great. He was shocked and happy to see me, and everyone was talking and drinking and having a good time. In the middle of the party, my girlfriend wanted to do a quick load of laundry since we were staying another night and had spilled something earlier. The washer and dryer were in the basement. She asked me to come down with her because she hated going alone in unfamiliar houses, especially to places like basements. I didn't blame her. That place fell off. We went back down, and this time I noticed just how steep and narrow the stairs were. Old wood, creaky steps, and a weak railing that felt like it wouldn't support anyone if they slipped. While she tossed the clothes into the washer, I kept close to the stairs, looking around again. The walls were unfinished, some insulation exposed, some pipes running low overhead. You had to duck in spots. The machine looked like it was from the early 2000s, noisy and clunky, but it worked. I kept checking behind me. There wasn't anything down there, no signs of rats or anything strange, just this uncomfortable energy that felt like it kept brushing the back of my neck. She set the cycle, and we rushed back up. We both laughed about how the place just gave off bad vibes, like something you couldn't explain, but we didn't want to talk about it too much either. It was easier to joke than to sit with how it actually made us feel. After the party, people left one by one, and it was just me and her again. We cleaned up a bit and sat down on the couch. The house got really quiet, too quiet. We weren't even talking, just sort of decompressing. That's when we heard the buzzer from the washer go off. We both looked up. She said she never took the laundry out. I checked my watch. It had been hours. The washer shouldn't have been running anymore. We both walked to the basement door. She stopped at the top and asked me to go first. I wasn't excited about it, but I went anyway. When I was halfway down, the buzzer went off again, loud and sudden. It startled me so bad I almost tripped. She jumped behind me and grabbed the railing. I didn't even stop to check what was going on. I just grabbed the clothes out of the machine and hurried back up. We hung the laundry in the bathroom and tried to forget about it, but that feeling was building again. There was something in that house that didn't sit right with me. Not something supernatural, just wrong. Like the house had history, and not the kind you put in a scrapbook. We were staying in the bedroom upstairs. It had probably been an attic originally. Low, slanted ceilings, one tiny window, and a single light switch at the bottom of the stairs. To get light up there, you had to flip the switch before climbing up, which always felt backwards to me. As I flipped the switch and started up the stairs to get ready for bed, I heard a loud banging sound. It wasn't footsteps or creaks. It was something sharp and metallic, like someone had dropped a pan or hit something metal against the floor. I stopped. The sound repeated, but louder. I turned toward the noise and saw that the ceiling fan was spinning at full speed. The long mounting pole that held it to the slanted ceiling was knocking violently against the drywall with each rotation. The clanging sound echoed through the house. I had no memory of turning it on. We hadn't touched it. It hadn't even been spinning before. I ran up the rest of the stairs and turned it off, just wanting to shut it up. We tried to sleep after that, but I had this awful dream. I was staring out the window, and there was a shadow of someone standing on the lawn. Not moving, just standing there, watching. The kind of dream that doesn't feel like a dream until you wake up with your heart racing. The morning light came in through the tiny window, and I felt drained, like I hadn't slept at all. I got out of bed and went down to the kitchen to make coffee. The kitchen was quiet, normal. As I was turning around to grab a mug, I looked over at the door to the basement again. I froze. I couldn't say what it was, but something about it felt off again, like it was waiting. I walked to the door, opened it, and looked down the stairs. Nothing had changed. Same unfinished walls. Same air that felt just a little too heavy. I went down again without even knowing why. I didn't need anything. I didn't plan to do anything. I just felt drawn. I walked slowly around the room, looked at the washer. Still off. Looked in the corners. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, breathing slowly, trying to figure out what exactly felt so wrong. I couldn't find a reason. Nothing I could point at. But it didn't matter. I felt it. I went back up, and we started packing. Our plan had always been to leave after breakfast, and now we were just speeding up the process. We cleaned up the kitchen, double-checked the rooms, and made sure everything was in the car. Right before we were about to leave, I went back into the kitchen for one last check. Everything looked fine. I was about to call out to my girlfriend that we were good to go when the buzzer went off again. That same loud, sharp buzz from the washer. We both stopped moving. It had been turned off. I pulled the clothes out myself. It should not have buzzed again. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. I grabbed the last bag, told her to start the car, and got out as fast as I could. As I stepped out the front door, I heard the metallic clanging again from upstairs. That same fan, turned on by itself, banging against the ceiling. I slammed the front door behind me, ran to the car, and I didn't look back. On the way home, I messaged the host just to let them know the washer kept going off and that we couldn't figure out how to shut off the fan. The only response I got was a short, polite message. Thank you for staying with us. That was it. No explanation. No questions. Just a thank you. I've stayed in plenty of air since then, but I always avoid basements now, especially the ones that smell like dust and old wood. I don't know what was wrong with that house. I just know I was never supposed to go back down there. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully trust Airbnb again. It started as a normal trip. My friend Rachel and I had planned to stay in Miami for about 3 weeks to check out neighborhoods and apartment listings. We were thinking about moving there full time, and this was supposed to be a mix of work and fun. We both worked remotely, so we figured we could get some sun, explore the area, and maybe even sign a lease somewhere before flying back. It felt exciting, starting a new chapter of our lives together in a new city. The Airbnb we booked looked perfect online. It was an apartment inside a modern building a couple blocks from the beach and had good reviews. The photos showed a clean bedroom, a small but bright kitchen, and a cozy little living room with a wall of windows. It wasn't huge, but it didn't need to be. We checked in on a Sunday. The host wasn't there, but they'd left us detailed instructions on how to enter using a keypad and mentioned they wouldn't be around during our stay. We let ourselves in late in the afternoon, and at first, everything looked fine. It smelled faintly like citrus cleaner. The floors were shiny, and the sheets on the bed looked freshly washed. The lights all worked, and there was even a little welcome note and 2 water bottles in the fridge. It felt professional, comfortable, safe. We unpacked, changed into something more comfortable, and walked a couple blocks to get tacos and margaritas. That night, we stayed up late talking about neighborhoods we wanted to visit, places to see, and how exciting it all was. I felt optimistic. The first few days were uneventful. Rachel and I worked during the day, explored listings and neighborhoods in the evening, and tried different restaurants and bars at night. The weather was great. The people seemed friendly. The apartment was small, but it suited us just fine. Everything was going well until it wasn't. On the fourth night, I went on a date with someone I'd met on an app. Rachel decided to stay in. She was tired from walking around in the sun all day and just wanted to take a shower and watch something in bed. I left around 6:30 p.m. and figured I'd be back around 10 or 11. I didn't even take my charger. I just threw my phone and wallet in my small purse and left. When I got back around 10:45 p.m., the front door was locked from the inside with the chain on. I knocked. I could hear movement inside, and then Rachel opened the door just wide enough to look at me. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she'd been crying. I stepped inside and asked her what happened. She didn't answer right away. She just pointed toward the ceiling in the bedroom. I followed her in. Above the mirror that hung on the wall across from a bed, there was a small round light fixture. It didn't have a bulb in it, just an empty socket with a weird-looking device inside. It was about the size of a large grape. At first glance, it didn't look like anything special, but once I really looked at it, I could see a small, shiny circle that looked a lot like a camera lens. I didn't say anything. My stomach dropped. I just stood there staring at it, trying to process what I was looking at. Rachel told me she'd been changing after a shower and caught a glimpse of something inside the fixture that didn't look right. She climbed up on a chair to get a closer look and saw what she thought was a lens. At first, she said she convinced herself she was imagining things, but the longer she stared at it, the more convinced she became that someone was watching. She called a couple of friends. Then she called me. Then she called 911. The police had already come and gone by the time I got home. She told me one of the officers acted like she was overreacting and told her it was probably nothing, just wires or a part of the old fixture. But another officer had been more understanding and said it was possible it could be a hidden camera. They didn't take the fixture down or confiscate it. They just looked around, asked a few questions, and then left. Rachel had been too scared to stay in the room after that. She waited in the living room with the TV on, staring at the door. I told her I believed her. I did, because I saw it too. It wasn't some regular socket. There was something in there. It looked like a little black eye, just watching. Neither of us slept that night. We moved our stuff out of the bedroom and stayed on the living room floor with the lights on. Every little sound made us flinch. Around 6 in the morning, I contacted Airbnb through the app and reported the issue. We sent photos. We explained everything in detail. Someone from their safety team responded a few hours later. They said they took reports like this seriously and were launching an investigation. They refunded the full amount for the remaining nights and offered to relocate us to a different property for the next week, free of charge. We packed up and left that same morning. We never saw the host. We never went back. The new place was nicer, more modern, and in a better neighborhood. But I didn't feel relaxed. I kept checking every light fixture, smoke detector, clock, and picture frame. I bought a small hidden camera detector from a local electronics shop and scanned every inch of that apartment before I let myself unpack. Nothing turned up, but I didn't feel better. The damage had already been done. People online were split when we posted a video about what happened. Some said it was obviously a camera, and they were horrified. Others claimed we were making something out of nothing, that it was just an empty light fixture, or maybe a motion sensor. Some even accused us of faking it for attention. But I know what I saw. I know how it made me feel. It felt like someone had been watching, like they'd seen everything. Me getting dressed, Rachel brushing her hair, us lying in bed laughing, talking, sleeping. That kind of violation doesn't go away easily. Airbnb said they were investigating and that hidden cameras weren't allowed in private areas like bedrooms or bathrooms. They told us they'd take action if anything suspicious was found. But we never heard back about the final result of the investigation. The apartment listing disappeared a few days later, but no one confirmed anything. It was just gone. After that week, we stayed in a small hotel near the airport for the last few days of our trip. It wasn't glamorous, but it had 24/7 security, a front desk, and we felt safer there. We still toured some apartments, but the energy had shifted. That sense of excitement was gone. We weren't talking about where we were going to live anymore. We were just counting down the days until we could go home. I still think about that trip a lot. I think about how close we came to not noticing. How we could have stayed the full 3 weeks and never known. I think about the fact that we'll probably never know for sure whether that device was recording or not. There's no closure in that kind of situation, just a sick, lingering feeling that someone saw you when you thought you were safe. I still use Airbnb sometimes, but only if I'm traveling with other people. I always bring my camera detector. I check everything twice. I've started reading reviews more carefully, looking for anything odd or vague. And even then, I don't let myself fully relax. That trip changed the way I travel. Maybe the way I see people, too. It was supposed to be the start of something new. Instead, it just made me more careful, more paranoid, and honestly, a lot more cynical about the idea of feeling truly safe in someone else's home. Two years ago, I spent a weekend in Paris with 3 of my close friends. We had booked an Airbnb in the 18th arrondissement, not far from Montmartre. It was a 4-story building, old but charming, with creaky stairs and ornate woodwork that looked like it had been there for 100 years. The place had this vintage Parisian vibe that looked amazing in photos, but in person it felt a little different. The walls were thin, the floors slanted, and the place made weird noises all the time. Pipes groaning, wood creaking, that sort of thing. We were there for only 3 nights. I ended up with the top floor room, which was basically a converted attic. It had slanted ceilings, 2 twin beds, a nightstand, and a small lamp. That was it. No windows, just a skylight that was so dirty and fogged up you couldn't really see out of it. The air felt stale up there, like it hadn't been ventilated properly in years. Even though the place had been cleaned before we arrived, that attic had this smell. Kind of like old dust mixed with something musty, like clothes that had been sitting in a closed-off closet for too long. I didn't complain, though. I figured it was just for a couple nights, and we weren't going to be spending much time in the apartment anyway. We had plans to see the city, eat, drink, hang out. But even after the first night, I couldn't shake the weird feeling I got every time I climbed up that final staircase to the attic. It was narrow, steep, and the door to the attic was a heavy wooden one with an old-fashioned handle. Every time it shut behind me, it sounded like it was sealing me in. I didn't sleep well the first night. It wasn't the noise from the street or anything. It was just this weird, uneasy feeling. I kept tossing and turning in the bed. The mattress was thin, and I could feel the metal springs in my back. The air felt too warm, but not comfortable, almost like it was pressing on me. I must have looked at the ceiling for hours. Even in the dark, the faint shapes of the ceiling beams looked like they were pressing down on me. Something about that attic just felt wrong. On the second night, it got worse. We'd come back late from dinner and drinks. Everyone else went to bed pretty quickly, and I headed up to the attic around 1 a.m. I lay down fully clothed, too tired to change. I tried to close my eyes and relax, but that same feeling was back. Unease, restlessness. It wasn't loud or anything, just silent and strange. I must have drifted in and out of shallow sleep for a few hours. Around 4 a.m., I was lying on my side facing the door. The rest of the attic was behind me. I hadn't really fallen into deep sleep at all, so I was still sort of awake when I heard the creaking. It started low, almost like a groan, and then I realized it was footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming up the final set of stairs. Those steps led only to the attic where I was. No one else had any reason to be up there. At first, I thought maybe it was one of my friends, maybe coming to mess with me or look for something. But they hadn't even come up there the entire stay. Then the doorknob rattled softly, and I heard the high-pitched whine of the door slowly creaking open. It was so quiet, I don't think I would have noticed it if I hadn't already been awake and staring right at it. The door inched open, barely, and then paused. I could see just a sliver of darkness behind it. No light, no movement, just the door cracked a couple inches wide. I stayed frozen. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched. Then, after a few seconds, I said my friend's name, thinking maybe it was him playing some stupid joke. Nothing. The door didn't move. No sound. I said his name again, louder. Still no response. Then suddenly, the door flung open, hard, slamming against the inside wall with a bang. I jumped. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it. There was a shape in the doorway. A person. Tall. but I couldn't see any details. They were just standing there, silhouetted against the faint orange glow from the streetlight filtering in through the skylight above. I couldn't make out a face or clothes, just the general shape of someone tall and motionless. They started walking toward me, slow, steady steps across the attic floor. My whole body went into panic mode. I didn't wait. I sat up and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, which was the lamp on the nightstand. It was ceramic and solid, not huge, but enough to hurt someone. I stood up, holding it like a baseball bat, backing away from the bed. The figure kept coming. The attic was small, maybe 12 feet across. I tried to stay on the opposite side, swinging the lamp wildly whenever the figure moved closer. I couldn't even think clearly. My hand was shaking, my breathing was loud and uneven. The figure never said a word, just kept moving slowly like they were sure of what they were doing. There was no noise, no chaos, just this terrifying quiet and the sound of my own breathing and shuffling feet. I started moving around them, circling in a wide arc toward the door. The attic was so tight, I had to duck under the sloped ceiling at one point. I almost tripped over one of the beds, but eventually I got the angle I needed. The path to the door was open. Without thinking twice, I hurled the lamp at the figure with everything I had. It shattered loudly against something, either the floor or the person, and I bolted through the open doorway. I flew down the stairs, skipping entire steps, gripping the handrail so tight it hurt. I didn't stop until I reached the second floor. I banged on my friend's door until he opened it in a daze, and I told him something bad was happening, that someone was in the attic. I didn't even wait for a full response. I just kept going, down another 2 flights to the front door. And that's when I saw it. The main apartment door was wide open. No one in sight. The street outside was empty, wet from a light drizzle that must have started while we were sleeping. My friend followed me out a few seconds later. We didn't even grab our phones or jackets. We were both in pajamas, barefoot, standing in the middle of the empty street, just trying to process what had happened. I tried to calm down, tried to explain again what I saw. He believed me instantly, probably because of the way I looked. I was shaking, pale, and completely out of it. We waited near a late-night cafe that hadn't opened yet. Eventually, we met up with our other 2 friends who had gone out clubbing and come back to find the place unlocked and messy. They were pissed. They thought we'd thrown the lamp in some drunken rage and left the place wide open. But I hadn't been drinking much, and I hadn't imagined what happened. The lamp was broken. Yeah, I broke it when I threw it at whoever was up there. And we definitely left the door open, but not by choice. Whoever came in must have come through the main apartment door and climbed the stairs without anyone hearing. We reported it to the Airbnb host later that morning and contacted the police. They took a report, but didn't seem too interested. They said there was no sign of forced entry, and they chalked it up to the door being left unlocked or not fully shut. But I know it was closed. I made sure to lock it before going to bed. We left the Airbnb that morning. Didn't even stay for the last night. Booked a cheap hotel across town just to get out of that building. I couldn't go back to that attic. I didn't even pack all my stuff. I left a couple shirts and a charger behind. It wasn't worth it. I still think about that night sometimes. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't see. The person never said a word, never ran, never lunged, just moved slow, like they were completely comfortable being there. That's what unsettled me the most. Whoever it was, they weren't afraid of getting caught. They moved like they belonged. I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs since then, but never again in an attic, and never again in a place with no proper locks. It happened about 15 years ago, back when I was still in middle school. My parents had agreed to let me have a little backyard camping night with 2 of my best friends, Aubrey and May. We were all around 12 or 13 at the time. I still remember how excited we were when my dad set up the big green camping tent for us out on the grass behind our house. My mom bought a bunch of snacks, chips, candy, sodas, juice boxes, and my dad ordered pizza before he and my mom left for dinner. It was a rare night where we were allowed to stay up as late as we wanted, and we had planned out the whole evening with stories, snacks, and what we thought would be harmless fun. As soon as my parents left, we ran out into the backyard carrying bowls of chips, bottles of soda, a Bluetooth speaker, and a stack of blankets and pillows. We tried to drag as much of the food as we could into the tent without dropping anything. I remember how we struggled to set everything up neatly, but it was just a chaotic mess of sleeping bags, junk food wrappers, and laughter. At first, everything felt perfect. The sun had just started to set, and the sky was this warm orange color. There were little bugs flying around, but not too many, and the air was warm enough that we didn't need jackets. We ate pizza, poured sodas into little plastic cups, and just talked for what felt like hours. We shared stories about kids at school, which boys we had crushes on, and who we thought might ask us to dance at the next school event. That was kind of the big deal at that age. Everything felt so lighthearted and simple. After it got dark, we pulled out flashlights and tried to build a little fort inside the tent with the extra blankets and pillows, but it kept collapsing. Still, we were having fun. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to feel like I could hear something outside the tent. Not clearly, just little rustling noises every now and then. At first I figured it was the wind or maybe a neighborhood cat, but after the third or fourth time, I unzipped the little mesh screen window on the side of the tent and peeked out. I didn't see anything, just the shadows from our porch light barely reaching the edge of the yard. About 5 minutes later, May said she thought she heard something too. She said it sounded like something brushed up against the side of the tent. Then Aubrey leaned toward the screen I had left open and said she saw something. She pointed and said, "There's something in black over there. Do you see it?" I looked exactly where she was pointing, and at first, it was too dark to see much of anything. But then I noticed this little flash of white, like a swoosh. It hit me all at once. It looked like the Nike symbol, glowing for a second in the darkness. That's when I screamed. Not even a quiet scream either. I screamed loud and hard, and that set everyone else off. All three of us panicked and sprinted out of the tent, leaving everything behind. We ran into the house as fast as we could and locked ourselves in the bathroom. It was the first room we could all fit into, and we didn't even think about calling anyone at first. We were shaking, trying to whisper about what we saw and if it was just in our heads. Then we heard footsteps, slow ones, right outside the bathroom. The doorknob jiggled just once, then again, like someone was trying to open it quietly. That's when we all started screaming again. Aubrey was already pulling out her phone and calling the police. I remember she had to unlock it with her thumbprint, and her hand was shaking so bad she dropped it once. While she talked to the dispatcher, we kept hearing the knob being turned slowly, like someone was playing with us. I don't know how long that went on before I finally heard my mom's voice calling from outside the door, telling us to come out. We cracked the door open and saw both of my parents standing there. My dad looked startled, but had this sort of nervous grin on his face. Then he said that he had just been playing a joke on us. He had apparently come back from dinner early and thought it would be funny to sneak around the tent to scare us a little. I couldn't believe it. Aubrey was still holding the phone, and my dad quickly apologized to the dispatcher before hanging up. We were all angry, especially after how scared we were, but my dad was always a bit of a jokester. He seemed genuinely sorry, too. He offered to make it up to us by starting the fire pit and helping us make s'mores. He even brought out blankets and set up chairs, played some light music, and kept asking if we needed anything else. I think he knew he took a little too far. Eventually, we calmed down and started to enjoy ourselves again. We sat by the fire, toasted marshmallows, and just talked. It was nice, honestly. My dad stayed with us outside for a while, probably trying to make sure we didn't completely hate him. After a couple hours, we got tired and went back to the tent. It was cozy again. We had all three sleeping bags laid out side by side and kept talking about random stuff until one by one, we drifted off. I think I was the last one awake. I just wanted to make sure my friends were okay. Maybe keep watch a little after everything that happened. I was lying there, staring at the ceiling of the tent when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. No music, no fire crackling, just the sound of crickets and my friends breathing softly in their sleep. It was comforting in a weird way until I started hearing that same heavy breathing again. At first, I thought maybe one of my friends was just in a deep sleep, but it kept getting louder, slower. It didn't sound right. I sat up slowly and looked around. The moonlight was barely shining through the mesh screen, but just enough that I could make out shapes. That's when I saw something move on the other side of the screen. A quick shadow. Then I heard the zipper of the tent door being pulled down. I didn't think. I just assumed my dad was back at it again and trying to scare us. I whispered loud enough, "Dad, knock it off." That was enough earlier. But nothing happened. The zipper kept going down. My friends were starting to stir now, groggy and confused. I raised my voice, telling him to stop, that we wanted to actually enjoy the rest of our night. Then a voice answered, low and rough, almost like it was struggling to come out. It said, "How do you know it's me?" Everything inside me froze. My heart felt like it stopped and I couldn't move. That voice wasn't my dad's. It was deeper, slower, and way too calm. I reached over and grabbed my friend's arms and yanked them toward the tent door leading into the yard. We didn't even stop to grab our stuff. We just ran, full speed, barefoot across the grass and straight back in the house. I think my friends were still too out of it to fully process what was happening, but I ran straight into my parents' room and started yelling about what just happened. My dad didn't say a word. He jumped out of bed, grabbed something off his nightstand, and went outside. I could hear him shouting into the yard, but I couldn't make out the words. A few minutes later, I heard him on the phone. He was calling the police. My mom stayed with us in the living room. She made us sit down, asked us over and over if we were okay, and kept looking toward the front window. Eventually, we saw the red and blue lights outside. The police stayed for maybe 20 minutes. My dad talked to them the whole time. We tried to listen, but couldn't hear much. After they left, my dad sat us all down and told us that someone had apparently been walking around the neighborhood, causing trouble. The police found him trying to get into someone's backyard a few blocks away. They caught him. I didn't know what to say. My dad apologized again and said he never should have messed around earlier. He told us we were safe now, that the guy was gone. They called her mom and went home. She didn't say much. Aubrey stayed, but we didn't go back to the tent. We brought all our pillows and blankets into the living room, and my dad helped us make a little fort using the couch cushions and extra sheets. He stayed up with us until we were too tired to keep our eyes open. The next morning, we woke up early. My mom made pancakes, eggs, and sausage. My dad looked like he hadn't slept at all. He asked how we were doing and if we wanted to hang out by the pool that day to take our minds off everything. That actually helped a lot. The sun was out, the pool water was warm, and we just floated around for hours without really talking about what had happened. Aubrey and I are still friends to this day, and every now and then we bring up that night. We always say it was the last time either of us tried camping, and honestly, I think we meant it. I was headed east on a long, empty stretch of highway somewhere in New Mexico. It was probably close to 1:45 in the morning. I'd been driving for hours, eyes heavy, arms stiff on the wheel. There was nothing around me, just scrubland, a low, dark sky, and the faint glow of stars through thin cloud cover. Every few minutes, my headlights would catch a road sign or a patch of guardrail, but most of the time it was just blackness, broken by that endless yellow line down the center of the highway. I had the radio off. No music, no podcast. I needed to focus. I remember I was between small towns, closer to nowhere than anywhere. My GPS had me on this route because the interstate was shut down for some kind of overnight maintenance. I wasn't happy about it, but I figured I'd just push through the back roads and make it to the next town by morning. The fuel tank was a little under half, enough to keep me going. The air conditioning was off, windows up, and the car had this dull smell of coffee and old fast food wrappers. My back ached from sitting too long. I thought about pulling over at the next gas station stretch, but there hadn't been one in over an hour. That's when I saw him. He was walking along the right shoulder of the road, his figure lit up by my high beams before I even registered it. I eased off the gas a little. He was young, maybe early 20s, skinny, light brown hair, wearing a hoodie and jeans. His shoes looked torn. He had his thumb out like he was hitchhiking, though not very confidently, more like it was just habit. He didn't even look up as I passed him. His head stayed low, and he kept walking forward like he expected me to keep going, which I did. I didn't pick up hitchhikers. Never had, not even in the middle of nowhere. As soon as I passed him, I felt a little bad. He looked worn down, alone. I glanced in the rear view, but the red glow from my taillights faded fast behind me, and within seconds he was swallowed back into the dark. I told myself someone else would stop. Someone headed west. Maybe. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept moving. It couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 minutes later when I saw him again. Same hoodie, same jeans, same long, slow walk along the shoulder. Same posture, thumb out barely raised. Except I had driven at least 5 miles since I last saw him. No way he could have gotten ahead of me. No shortcuts, no turnoffs, no parallel roads. Just one long highway in the middle of the desert. I stared at him as I passed. My heart was suddenly pounding. Not fast, but heavy. Deep, slow thuds in my chest. I looked in my mirrors again. Nothing. Just the dark. I kept driving. A little faster now. My hands were clammy. The air in the car felt warmer, like it had thickened. I rolled the window down a bit, but the outside air was just as dead. No wind. No sound. I reached for my phone and checked the GPS, even though I knew the route hadn't changed. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just more miles of nothing. I told myself it wasn't the same guy. Maybe just a coincidence. Maybe 2 hitchhikers dressed the same, or maybe I was overtired and imagining details. I'd been on the road for almost 9 hours by then. My brain wasn't working right, but I couldn't shake it. I kept watching the horizon now, watching for that shape to show up again. I even started counting the mile markers. I tried to remember exactly how far I'd gone since I'd seen him the first time. Nothing made sense. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No sign of him. I started to breathe easier. Maybe it was just a weird fluke. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Then I saw something in the mirror. He was standing dead center in the road behind me. Not walking anymore, just standing still. I didn't see him appear. 1 second the road behind me was empty. The next second he was there in the middle of the lane, facing straight at me. I nearly swerved. I slammed on the brakes for a second, then caught myself and kept going. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to be anywhere near that guy. The part of my brain that wanted to help people had shut off completely. It had been replaced by something colder, older, something more primal. All I wanted now was distance. I didn't see him again after that, but I kept checking my mirrors. Every minute, every 10 seconds. I kept thinking I'd see his silhouette there, just behind my taillights. I thought I'd maybe see him on the shoulder again, but he never showed up. What really messed with me was that I knew I wasn't dreaming. I hadn't nodded off, hadn't hallucinated. I was awake, alert. I remember the details too clearly. The way his shoes dragged, the loose strings on his hoodie, the shadows under his eyes. I didn't imagine it. It was the same guy. I didn't stop again that whole night. No bathroom break, no fuel stop. I didn't even pull over to rest my eyes. I just kept driving. Eventually, around 4:30 a.m., I hit the edge of small town, Tucumcari, I think. There were street lights, gas stations, diners. People. I saw 2 guys unloading a truck near a motel, and I almost felt relieved enough to cry. I pulled into a brightly lit parking lot near a fast food place and just sat there. I didn't even eat. I just sat with the engine running and the doors locked, trying to slow my breathing. I thought about reporting it, calling the cops, maybe, but what would I even say? That I saw a hitchhiker twice, and then he appeared in the road behind me somehow? That I thought he was stalking me even though there was no car, no bike, no way he could have followed? They'd write it off as exhaustion. Maybe that's what it was. But I know what I saw. I stayed in town until the sun came up. I filled my tank, got coffee, and when I finally started driving again, I stuck to main roads. No shortcuts, no back highways. I didn't care if it took longer. Even now, when I think back to that night, the part that sticks with me isn't how he looked or how he kept showing up. It's that final moment, when I looked in the rear view and saw him standing there. The way he was just there, like he'd been waiting the whole time, like he knew I'd look back. I never saw him again, but I still remember that face, expressionless, pale under my brake lights, just watching. And I never drive through New Mexico at night anymore. I was driving through the Fort Pitt Tunnel just outside Pittsburgh around 1:15 in the morning. I've been on the road for hours, heading back from a job in Ohio, and all I could think about was getting home, taking a shower, and crawling into bed. My eyes felt heavy, and the yellow lines on the road were starting to blur a little, that hypnotic kind of tired where everything looks the same. As I entered the tunnel, I noticed a car in my rearview mirror. It was maybe 5 or 6 car lengths behind me, a dark sedan, probably black or navy, with one of those blue tinted headlights. I didn't think anything of it at first. The tunnel was nearly empty, just me, that car, and the hum of my tires echoing off the concrete walls. Halfway through the tunnel, the sedan suddenly flashed its high beams. Not just once, but 3 or 4 times, quick and bright, lighting up my whole interior like a camera flash. It startled me, and I sat up straighter, blinking. I thought maybe I'd cut the guy off earlier without realizing it, or maybe my taillights were acting up. Either way, I didn't react. I just kept driving, eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. When we came out of the tunnel, the road opened up and curved toward the bridge. That's when the sedan sped up. It moved into the left lane and pulled up alongside me. I glanced over just long enough to see the driver, a guy maybe in his 40s with a baseball cap on backwards, waving his hand and gesturing down toward my car. I couldn't hear him, but he kept motioning for me to roll my window down. I didn't want to. I never do that kind of thing late at night, especially not when I'm alone, but something about the urgency in his movements made me pause. I cracked the window just a couple of inches, just enough to hear. The wind was loud, but I caught it. He shouted, "There's someone on your roof." My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. I instinctively hit the brakes hard. My tires squealed a little, and the car jolted as I pulled over to the shoulder. The guy in the sedan slowed down too and kept going, but he shouted again before disappearing ahead. "Check your roof." I jumped out of my car, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The highway was nearly empty, just a few cars in the distance, and the only sound was the rush of wind and the low rumble of a semi passing on the far side. I looked up at the roof of my car. Nothing. Then I walked around to the back. That's when I saw them, muddy handprints on the rear windshield. Several of them. Smudged, wet, real. Not dry dirt, but thick, clumpy mud. And down the side of the car, faint streaks as if someone had slid off. Not dragged. Slid. I stood there frozen, the smell of damp soil hitting my nose, mixed with the metallic tang of my own sweat. I looked around again. There was no one nearby, no place someone could hide. Just the steep concrete walls on one side and the barrier overlooking the river on the other. I didn't know what to think. I opened all the doors and checked the back seat. Empty. I even got down on my knees and looked under the car. Nothing. I stood up slowly, trying to put the pieces together. The prints weren't dry, which meant whoever it was had been on there recently. Very recently. Maybe even in the tunnel. I hadn't stopped for hours, not since I got gas in Steubenville around 11:45. That station had been almost deserted, just me and the clerk inside who looked half asleep. I remembered I went inside to pay with cash. I'd only been away from the car for 2 or 3 minutes at most. Could someone have gotten on the roof then? But even if they had, how would I not have heard them? Felt them? I got back in the car and sat there for a minute with the engine running, headlights casting a wide glow on the shoulder. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. I checked my phone, 1 bar signal. I considered calling the cops, but what would I say? That someone might have been riding on my roof through a tunnel and then vanished? I didn't even see anyone, and the guy in the sedan was gone. I didn't have a plate number, just some muddy smears and a growing sense of unease. Eventually, I got back on the highway. I kept checking my mirrors, glancing up at the roof through the sunroof, trying to convince myself it was over, that maybe it was a prank or a weird hallucination or some dirty road debris I hadn't noticed until someone pointed it out. But the way the mud was smeared, the way it streaked downward, it didn't feel random. I got off the highway about 15 minutes later in a part of Pittsburgh I wasn't super familiar with. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station just to regroup. I walked around the car again. The handprints were still there, starting to dry now. I took pictures this time. I even wiped one of them with a tissue. It was real mud, thick with tiny specks of leaves and gravel. Then I noticed something else. Just above the rear driver's side window, there were faint scratch marks on the paint. Thin, shallow, but noticeable in the right light. Not from branch. These were vertical like fingernails. 4 of them. I drove the rest of the way home jittery, checking every sound, every shadow. I parked under the bright floodlight in my apartment lot and checked the car one last time. Nothing new. No more prints. No sign anyone had tried to get back in or on. Still, I barely slept that night. The next day, I took the car to a self-wash and scrubbed every inch of it. As I sprayed down the back windshield, the mud ran down in thick brown streaks, and for a second, I imagined someone lying flat on the roof, their fingers pressed against the glass, holding on. The image made my stomach twist. Later that week, I told a coworker what happened. He half joked that maybe it was some kind of stunt, or maybe someone trying to sneak a ride across state lines. But neither of us laughed, because the truth is, I don't know what it was, and I don't think I ever will. What gets me still is that I never heard anything. No footsteps, no thumps, not even a whisper of weight shift. Just a guy flashing his brights to warn me. And when I stopped, whoever it was already gone. But they had been there. Someone was definitely on my roof. I was somewhere in rural Kentucky when it happened. I'd been on the road for almost 10 hours, driving back home from a job site in Tennessee. It was supposed to be a straight shot, highway all the way, but somewhere past Lexington, my GPS rerouted me. Road construction ahead, it said. I didn't think much of it. I just followed the blue line like I always did, trusting it to get me back safely. Before long, the road started to narrow. 2 lanes turned into 1. Street lights disappeared. I passed fewer and fewer houses. The last gas station I'd seen was almost 20 miles back, and even that place had looked half abandoned. I was surrounded by trees now, thick woods on both sides. I didn't even have cell service anymore. I kept glancing down at the GPS screen, making sure I hadn't missed a turn. It still said I was on the right track. I told myself I'd be back on the main road in a few minutes. It was just past 1 a.m. when the pavement ended. The tires thumped down onto gravel, and a small wooden sign flashed by on my right. It was too dark to read what it said. I slowed down a little, rolling over loose stone and dirt, hoping this was just a short stretch before the road picked back up. The GPS still showed a blue line ahead, so I kept going. The road wound through the trees, no other cars in sight. My headlights cut through the dark, catching glimpses of branches and tall grass on either side. Every now and then I thought I saw movement in the woods, but it was probably just animals, deer or raccoons, maybe a coyote. I kept driving, eyes darting between the screen and the road. Then I came around a bend, and everything changed. There were 3 trucks parked across the road ahead. Big ones. 2 looked like older Ford pickups, maybe from the 90s, with rusted hoods and missing headlights. The third was newer, matte black with dark tinted windows. They were positioned at an angle, blocking the road completely. One of them had its headlights on, blasting straight into my windshield, making it impossible to see beyond them. I hit the brakes hard. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I came to a stop. For a second, I just sat there, unsure what I was looking at. The GPS didn't react. The blue line still stretched forward, right through the trucks. Then 2 men stepped out from the shadows. They didn't run. They didn't wave. They just walked, slow and steady, toward my car. One was tall, wearing a flannel shirt and holding something in his hand. The other wore a sleeveless jacket, his arms covered in tattoos. I couldn't see their faces clearly through the glare, but they weren't in a hurry. They moved like they had all the time in the world, like they knew I wasn't going anywhere. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. This wasn't a detour. This wasn't construction. This was something else, something bad. I didn't wait to find out what. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and floored the gas. The tire spun for a second before gripping the gravel. The car jolted backward, bouncing over ruts and potholes. My back tires kicked up dust and stones, and I heard one of them yell something, though I couldn't make out the words. I kept my foot on the gas, not even looking behind me. I was going too fast, but I didn't care. I just knew I had to get away from there. The rear end fishtailed, and I fought the wheel, trying to keep it steady. The trees blurred past on either side, and for a moment I thought I was going to lose it, spin out and crash into the ditch. But somehow I kept control. After what felt like forever, I reached the bend again and took it hard, swinging wide. The car groaned in protest, but I didn't slow down. I just kept going back the way I came. I didn't see any headlights in my mirror, but I didn't stop to check if they were following. I drove fast, too fast for miles. Every corner I took felt like it would be my last. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept glancing at the GPS, but now it was glitching, frozen on the same screen, spinning endlessly. Finally, after what must have been 20 or 30 minutes, the gravel turned back into pavement. I hit the gas even harder, watching the trees blur past. I didn't relax until I saw the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. Signs of life. A small town, maybe. I didn't care what it was. I just needed to be around people again. I pulled into a gas station on the edge of town. It was one of those 24-hour places with flickering fluorescent lights and a single guy behind the counter. I parked under the brightest light I could find and just sat there for a while, engine running, trying to breathe. Eventually I got out, walked around the car, checked the tires, the undercarriage. Everything looked okay. No damage. No one had followed me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd come close to something really bad. I didn't call the police. What was I going to say? I turned down the wrong road and some guy scared me. I didn't even have a license plate or a good description. Besides, I just wanted to put distance between me and that place. I bought a coffee, got back in the car, and changed my GPS settings to avoid back roads completely. I stuck to the interstate after that, even if it meant going an hour out of the way. I didn't care. The main roads felt safer. I didn't stop again until I was almost home. Later, when I checked the route again in daylight, that gravel road didn't even show up on most maps. Just a thin line, unmarked and unnamed, cutting through a patch of woods in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what those guys wanted. Maybe it was just a robbery. Maybe worse. But I still think about it sometimes. How easily it could have gone another way. How fast everything turned from routine to dangerous. Now, whenever I drive at night, I double check every turn. I keep my tank full and my doors locked. I don't trust the GPS blindly anymore. And if the road ahead looks wrong, I don't take chances. I turn around. It was close to 1:45 a.m., and I was somewhere deep in northern Arizona, heading east on a quiet two-lane road that barely had any lights. The stretch of highway I was on had no towns for miles. Just desert brush, wide open space, and a moon that didn't do much to light anything up. My phone had no signal for at least the last 40 minutes, and I hadn't seen another car in longer than that. The road had a silence to it that made everything feel a little off, like something was watching from the dark. I've been driving for hours already, and fatigue was creeping in, but I wasn't tired enough to risk pulling over. Every once in a while, I'd roll the window down just to wake myself up a bit. That's when I saw her. Off to the right, on the shoulder, a woman in jeans and a white tank top, arms waving like she was in trouble. She didn't look like she was injured, but the way she was moving, frantic, panicked, it didn't seem like she was just asking for help with a flat tire or something simple. I slowed down. My first instinct told me to keep going, but it felt wrong to leave her out there in the middle of nowhere. I stopped about 15 feet ahead of where she stood and rolled my window down halfway. Not all the way, just enough to talk through. She stepped up quickly to the window, talking fast. She said her boyfriend had hit her and left her there. Her voice was shaky, like she was on the edge of crying, and she told me her phone had died. She needed help, wanted me to call the cops or give her a ride. I didn't answer her right away. I was just about to ask her to step back so I could call the police when something in my side mirror caught my eye. At first, it didn't register what I was seeing. Just slow movement, almost like a shadow stretching toward my car. Then I focused and my stomach dropped. There was a man crawling, on his elbows and knees, low to the ground like he was trying not to be seen. He was coming out from the ditch just behind my car, moving toward the back passenger side door. I didn't even look back at the woman. I just reacted. I slammed my foot on the gas hard. The engine screamed and the tires jerked on the asphalt as I sped off. The passenger door wasn't shut all the way from when I had rolled the window down and cracked it open slightly for air earlier. It flew open and slammed shut again from the force. I didn't care. The car swerved a little as I pulled away, and for a second I thought I felt the back of the car dip, like someone might have grabbed onto the bumper or tried to climb in, but I didn't stop to check. I drove faster than I should have on a road like that, eyes flicking between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. My hands were clamped so tight on the steering wheel that my fingers went numb. I kept expecting headlights behind me, someone chasing, but there was nothing, just blackness and the road stretched in front of me like a ribbon that never ended. I drove for another 20 minutes without seeing a single house, gas station, or even a signpost. I had no signal still. I didn't stop, not until I reached a diner with a single flickering open 24 hours sign. It's at the edge of a gravel parking lot with two old pickups parked out front and a semi idling nearby. I pulled in fast, parked right under one of the overhead lights, and locked my doors. I sat there for a while, breathing heavy. My hands were still shaking. My mind kept replaying the image of that guy crawling toward my car. His clothes were dark, so he blended in with the night. And that's what scared me the most, how close he got without me hearing a thing. If I hadn't caught that movement in the mirror when I did, I might have opened the door. Or he might have gotten inside when I wasn't looking. I kept wondering if the woman was working with him, if it was some kind of setup. After about 10 minutes of just sitting and staring at the diner, I finally went inside. It smelled like old grease and stale coffee, but I didn't care. The waitress looked up, gave me a polite nod, and asked what I wanted. I asked if I could use their phone. She handed it over without a word. I called the local sheriff's department and told them everything. They sent a deputy out to meet me. I waited for nearly an hour before he showed up. He was a younger guy, real polite, but tired looking, like he'd been on shift a while. I gave him every detail I could remember, the road I was on, how far back it seemed, what the woman looked like, what the guy was doing. He didn't say much while I talked, just wrote things down in a little notebook. When I was done, he nodded and told me I made the right call by not stopping any longer than I did. Said the area I was in had seen a few incidents like that before, people flagging down cars and then trying to rob or carjack them. He didn't confirm anything, but the way he said it told me it wasn't some rare thing out there. I asked if he was going to send someone to check the area. He said yes, but the chances of finding anyone now were slim. Too much open land, too many places to disappear. He gave me his card and told me to call if I remembered anything else. I sat in that diner until the sun started rising, ordered some coffee I didn't really drink, and tried to calm down. I kept looking out of my car, making sure no one was near it. Every time a truck pulled into the lot, I tensed up. Eventually, the sky started turning orange and traffic picked up a little. I felt safer once the light came back. That's when I got back in the car and kept driving, finally heading towards civilization. But the whole time, I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. Couldn't stop wondering how long that guy had been in the ditch. If he'd been watching for a while, just waiting for someone to stop. If they had picked that spot because they knew people would feel guilty about leaving a woman alone in the dark. It was a trap. I'm almost sure of it. A setup. Whether she was in on it or not, I'll never know. But the timing was too perfect. Her panic, the dead phone, the location, middle of nowhere. Since then, I don't stop for anyone on the side of the road at night. I call in if I have signal, but I don't stop. Not anymore, because I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't seen him. Maybe they would have robbed me. Maybe worse. All I know is I came way too close to finding out. I've been hauling freight through Nevada for over a decade now. If you've ever driven through that stretch, especially after midnight, you know it's something else. Just miles of nothing but cracked pavement, desert brush, and sky. The radio barely works. No cell signal. No lights except the ones you bring with you. I've always told myself I prefer the solitude. It keeps things simple, quiet, predictable. That night, I was running a load from Reno to Salt Lake City, cutting through the loneliest part of Route 50. It was just past midnight, and I'd been on the road for nearly 9 hours already. My eyes were starting to get that dry, itchy feeling they always do when I've been staring at headlights for too long. I figured I'd push another hour or two before pulling into a turnout to crash in the sleeper cab. The air was thick with silence, the kind that starts to buzz in your ears. Then I saw him. He was walking along the shoulder with his thumb out. A guy in a torn-up green jacket, jeans so dusty they looked gray, and old boots that barely seemed to hold together. His face was shadowed by a hood, but I could see the beard unkempt and patchy, and something about the way he walked slow, steady, like he'd been walking forever, just stuck with me. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. Too many stories, too many risks. But I guess the long hours got to me. Maybe I was just sick of my own voice and the hum of tires. Against my better judgment, I slowed and rolled the truck to a stop. He climbed in without a word, just nodded and shut the door behind him. He smelled like sweat and dry dirt, like someone who'd been sleeping outside for days. But he wasn't rude, just quiet, polite even. After a few miles, he said his name was Mitch and he was headed to Ely. I told him I could take him part of the way, at least past Eureka. He nodded again, said thanks. That was it. For a long time, neither of us said much. He just stared out the windshield while I kept my eyes on the road. The heater hummed low, warm air brushing against the glass. The road stretched out ahead of us like a ribbon disappearing into darkness. Every once in a while, I glanced over at him, trying to get a better look at his face, but he kept it turned toward the window. Something about the way he sat, too still, too calm, made my neck tense up. Maybe an hour passed. Then out of nowhere he spoke. "You always sleep in the cab," he said, voice low, almost casual. "But do you switch it up sometimes?" I didn't answer right away. The question felt off. Not just strange, but personal, like he knew something he shouldn't. "Cab," I said after a pause, keeping my voice steady. "Always the cab." He didn't look at me, just nodded like that confirmed something he already knew. Then he said it. "That rest stop near Eureka with the red vending machine. You parked there Tuesday night." I felt my chest tighten. He was right. Dead right. I'd stopped there Tuesday after driving straight from Sacramento. I remembered the vending machine because I bought a bag of peanuts that got stuck behind the glass. I remember leaving the curtains open because it was too hot in the cab and I thought it didn't matter out there in the middle of nowhere. How the hell could he have known that? I kept my eyes on the road, heart thudding hard in my chest. I didn't say anything. Didn't want to tip him off that he'd rattled me. He didn't say anything else either. Just sat there with that same blank expression, hands resting on his knees. My mouth was dry. I swallowed and said something about needing fuel. I don't even remember what town we were near. Maybe Austin, maybe just before. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, the kind with flickering lights and a rusted sign that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 90s. Told him I needed to top off the tank and use the bathroom. The second he stepped out and shut the door, I hit the lock and threw the truck into gear. My tires squealed as I tore out of the lot. I didn't look back. I drove for 4 hours straight. Didn't stop. Didn't think. My eyes were wide open, every part of me humming with adrenaline. It was like my brain had gone into overdrive, replaying every second with him in the cab, every word he'd said, every silence. The way he looked at the road, the way he knew where I'd been, the way he knew my curtains were open. He'd been watching me. Somewhere out there, on one of those empty stretches of highway, he'd seen my truck. Maybe even closer than that. Maybe while I slept, too dumb to think someone might be nearby. I replayed the thought over and over. Did I hear anything that night? A sound? A shadow moving past the window? Nothing came to mind. I felt sick. I didn't stop until the sun was creeping over the horizon. I found a larger truck stop outside Ely. Ironic, considering that's where he said he was going, and pulled into the back lot. Locked every door, shut the curtains tight, and just sat in the driver's seat for what felt like forever, gripping the wheel with both hands. Eventually, I moved to the sleeper cab, but I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of footsteps, for a knock, for anything. But nothing came. The next day, I thought about reporting it. But what would I say? A guy I picked up on the road knew where I'd parked a few nights ago? That's not a crime. That's not even a lead. Hell, I didn't even know his last name. Mitch. Just Mitch. That's all I had. I didn't even have a good description. His face never left the shadows long enough for me to really take it in. All I remember clearly are his hands, calloused, cracked, fingernails full of dirt. I started being more careful after that. Never leave the curtains open anymore, not even when it's 100 degrees in the desert. I started keeping a crowbar tucked next to the seat and a tire iron within reach when I sleep. I stopped picking up hitchhikers altogether. No exceptions, not even for a stranded family with kids. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm parked off a Tulane in the middle of nowhere, I still think about him. About how he knew, and about how I didn't see a damn thing. It's not ghosts you have to worry about out here. It's people, real people, people like Mitch. It was the summer I turned 12 when my parents and I went on a vacation to a coastal town I'd never heard of before. We had taken a long-distance bus to get there, and by the time we arrived, it was early afternoon, hot, and everyone was exhausted. I remember getting off the bus and immediately feeling overwhelmed. There were people everywhere, locals, tourists, vendors shouting out what they were selling, and a bunch of men approaching newly arrived travelers, offering them rooms to rent. It was loud and chaotic, and my parents looked completely wiped out from the heat and travel. We hadn't booked a place in advance, which I now realize wasn't the best idea, but at the time, I was just a kid trailing behind my parents. My dad was carrying 2 heavy bags, sweating and squinting into the sun, and my mom kept adjusting her scarf and muttering about how she wished she had packed differently. We were walking away from the station, and then this bald guy came up to us. That's all I can remember about him. He was completely bald, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s, and there was something about him that made my skin crawl. He didn't look particularly dirty or threatening, but he had this blank expression, like he didn't care what you thought about him. I remember looking at his eyes and feeling something tighten in my chest. He just gave off this strange, off feeling. He started talking to my dad, and I could tell my dad wasn't in the mood to think too hard. He looked tired and distracted and was probably just trying to find a place quickly so we could rest. The guy told him he had a nice apartment not too far away. My dad nodded, and before I knew it, we were following the bald guy down a side street. My mom and I lagged behind a little. She looked unsure, and I felt anxious, like something wasn't sitting right. As we were walking, we passed this little cafe. It wasn't very busy, just a couple of tables out front and one young waiter cleaning off a tray. He couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. As we passed, he looked directly at my mom and me, and without making a scene, he leaned in and said something quietly. I didn't catch all of it, but I heard enough to freeze in my tracks. He said we shouldn't go with the bald guy. He said something like he's not safe and don't go. My mom looked back at the guy and then at my dad, who was still walking alongside him, carrying our things. She didn't say anything, just grabbed my hand a little tighter and kept walking. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to say something, but I was just a kid, and when you're young, you think your parents know what they're doing. Even though my gut was screaming that this was a bad idea, I didn't speak up. The neighborhood we were walking through got quieter. Fewer people, narrower streets, more shadows. It wasn't exactly run down, but it didn't feel touristy either. There were no shops or hostels, no signs, nothing welcoming. Just old buildings with closed shutters and narrow staircases. We climbed up this twisting staircase outside one of the buildings. It felt like forever, and by the time we reached the top, I was sweating and breathing hard. The guy unlocked the door and motioned for us to come in. The second I stepped inside, I knew I didn't want to stay there. The room was small and dark, with barely any light coming from the only tiny window, which faced a brick wall maybe 2 feet away. The ceiling was low, the air was thick and stale, and there was a strange smell, like mold and cheap air freshener. The furniture was oddly colorful, like someone had tried to make the place look cheerful, but it just fell off. The bed covers were bright red and green, clashing with purple curtains. There were plastic flowers in a dusty vase on a tiny table, and everything felt cramped, like a bunker, like a place where you couldn't breathe. The guy stood near the door, watching us. I remember him asking what we thought, and my mom looking around and shaking her head slightly. My dad was quiet, maybe realizing what a mistake this was. The guy kept insisting it was a great deal, that the location was perfect, that we wouldn't find anything cheaper. His tone shifted quickly. He started off calm, but the more we hesitated, the more his voice took on an edge. He said he had other rooms, that we should just sit down and talk about it, that we'd be sorry if we passed it up. My mom moved closer to me. She didn't sit down, and neither did my dad. The air in that room felt heavier by the second. I could feel sweat running down my back. I looked at the closed door behind him and realized he was standing right in front of it. My heart started pounding. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but every instinct told me we needed to leave. Finally, my dad spoke. He said we weren't interested and thanked the guy, trying to keep his tone calm. The man didn't take it well. He didn't yell, but his face changed, like a mask slipping off. His jaw tightened, and his smile vanished. He looked at my dad in a way I'll never forget, like he was trying to decide something. He stepped aside just enough to let us pass. We didn't wait around. My dad grabbed the bags and we got out of there fast. The staircase seemed even steeper on the way down. When we got back to the main street and past the cafe again, the same young waiter caught our eye. He gave a small nod, like he was relieved we were okay. That's when he told us more clearly. He said the guy had been in trouble before, had connections with some bad people, and that tourists who rented from him sometimes didn't stay the night. That stuck with me. He didn't say anything specific, but the way he said it chilled me. We didn't report anything. We just left. We found another place not too far away, run by a kind older woman who had a clean, airy apartment with big windows and normal furniture. It wasn't fancy, but it felt safe. We stayed there for the rest of the 10 days, and nothing else weird happened. We went sightseeing, took photos, ate at local places, and tried to enjoy the vacation. But I couldn't stop thinking about that first place. That tiny, windowless room. The way the guy changed a second, we said no. The way he watched us. The feeling that we weren't supposed to leave once we got inside. I don't know what would have happened if we'd stayed. I don't want to know. And even though I was just a kid, that experience left something permanent in me. A kind of quiet fear. A lesson, maybe, that you have to trust your gut even if the people around you don't. Years later, I still remember the way that room looked and smelled. I still remember the narrow stairs and the waiter's warning. And sometimes I think about all the people who might not have walked out of that room the way we did. I was doing an overnight drive from Michigan to Georgia, hauling a load of pallets down I-75. The run wasn't supposed to be stressful. I'd done this route a dozen times, and I knew the stretches of road well enough to drive them in my sleep. The night was quiet, cold for early spring, and the kind of empty that makes your thoughts louder than the engine. I had music on low, sipping weak gas station coffee, just counting the mile markers and the hours till daylight. It was a little after 3 a.m. when I pulled off near Columbus. There was a rest stop I liked. Nothing special, just a long lot with a couple rows of truck spaces, some vending machines, and a single lit bathroom at the far end. I was getting that dry-eyed, itchy skin tired that tells you to get out and walk around before you drift off behind the wheel. So I pulled in, parked between two other rigs, shut down the engine, and climbed out. The air was sharp, a little damp, and the only sound was the faint hum of another truck's APU somewhere behind me. I headed to the bathroom, yawning the whole way. Inside, the lights were flickering slightly, and one of the faucets was slowly dripping into a stained porcelain sink. I didn't think much of it. These places were never exactly well kept. I used the toilet, splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror at my bloodshot eyes, and then stepped back outside. The lot was still, quiet in that strange way truck stops get in the middle of the night. Just the low hum of diesels idling and the faint breeze moving through the trees out behind the lot. As I made my way back to my truck, I passed a rig that I hadn't noticed when I pulled in. Unit number 7 was written in fading letters on the side of the cab door, the paint underneath rusted and flaking. It was an older model, maybe early 2000s, dark blue but sun-bleached in patches. The headlights were on, casting a dull yellow light across the pavement, but the engine wasn't running. No sign of anyone in the driver's seat. That wasn't exactly rare. Some guys leave their lights on by accident. Some sleep in the back and leave the cab lit for security. But something about this truck rubbed me the wrong way. It looked like it hadn't been washed in years. The side mirrors were cracked, and the air around it felt stiller than the rest of the lot. Like the air didn't want to move near it. I glanced at it as I walked by. Nothing moved, just the glow of the headlights and the reflection off the windshield. But as I climbed up into my cab, I looked in my side mirror and I saw it. Movement. Quick. Just a shadow or figure ducking down behind unit number 7. It wasn't like someone dropping something or stretching. It was deliberate. Fast. I froze halfway into the seat, 1 foot still on the step. My hand was on the steering wheel, but I wasn't ready to drive off just yet. I stared at the mirror, not blinking. After a few seconds, nothing else happened. No more movement. No door opened or closed. No sound, just that stillness. Then something changed. I looked straight at the windshield of unit number 7. There was a shape inside. A silhouette. I couldn't make out details, but someone was in there. They moved again, quick, like they didn't want me seen. Just a duck of the head or a shift of the shoulders, and then they were gone again into the shadows of the cab. I kept watching. Then a hand rose up, slow and steady, and pressed something against the inside of the windshield. A piece of paper, standard white, looked like it had writing on it. I leaned forward, squinting, but I couldn't make out what it said from where I was. So I climbed down. I didn't really think through what I was doing. Maybe I thought someone needed help. Maybe I was just too tired to trust my own eyes. I walked across the lot, keeping my boots quiet on the concrete. The closer I got, the more I felt it, that wrong feeling. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I got maybe 10 feet away, and the paper was gone. There was no sign of anyone inside the cab. I stood there a moment, trying to see through the windshield, but the glare from the lights made it hard. I stepped around to the side of the trailer. That's when I saw the message. It was sprayed in red paint, sloppy, angry, fresh. The letters were jagged and ran down the side of the white trailer like they'd been sprayed in a rush. You parked in my spot. I stood still. My stomach dropped. I looked around. Nobody else moving in the lot. All the other trucks were dark. No doors opening. No voices. Just me in that trailer and the words staring me down like a warning. I backed away. I didn't turn my back on the cab. I just walked backward, slow, one step at a time, until I was near my rig. Then I climbed in fast, shut the door, and locked it. My heart was hammering. I reached for the keys and turned the engine over. The lights on the dash flicked on, and I flicked my own headlights off. I didn't want to draw attention. Didn't even check my mirrors. I just put it in gear and rolled out slow, coasting out of the lot with my foot barely on the gas. Once I hit the ramp back to the highway, I accelerated, but I kept the headlights off for a while. Just my marker lights. My palms were sweaty on the wheel. Every few minutes, I checked the mirrors, half expecting to see that rusted-out cab pulling onto the road behind me. But nothing followed. I drove the rest of the night straight through. No more stops. No bathroom breaks. No coffee refills. I made it to a way station outside Atlanta just after sunrise and pulled off. I finally let myself breathe. My legs were sore from tensing up so long. Later that morning, I walked around the side of my trailer just to make sure I hadn't imagined everything. Just to be sure, there were no markings, no paint, no spray, nothing on the doors or the sides. But I don't go to that rest stop anymore. I don't even pull off in that area if I can help it. And now, whenever I park and stop, I always check the spot before I back in. I look around and ask myself, is this really just an empty space? Because someone out there thinks otherwise. My mom told me this story not too long ago, but it happened about 10 years ago. I wasn't that old when it happened, maybe around 10 or 11, so I didn't know about it at the time. But after she told me, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't something she told lightly either. My mom's not the kind of person to joke about stuff like this. And our family doesn't talk about ghost stories or weird things. We're not superstitious people, not religious either, and nothing strange had really ever happened to us before. That's what makes it so weird. That's what makes it stick in my head even now. It was about my cousin Amanda. She was 17 when it happened. I remember her, not too well, but I do. She used to come over sometimes, especially during birthdays or family get-togethers. I mostly remember her being loud in a fun way. She laughed a lot. She had this big, open smile, and she always wore the same red baseball cap with some faded white logo on the front. She had this denim dungaree outfit she wore over a plain white jacket. And when I think of her, that's what she's wearing in my mind. I remember her smell too, kind of like bubblegum and this faint flowery perfume. She wasn't one of those cousins who stayed glued to her phone. She'd play with the little kids, sit with the adults, talk to everyone. I didn't really understand how much people liked her until after she was gone. Amanda died in a car crash. I didn't go to the funeral because my parents said it wasn't something a kid needed to see. I remember bits of it though. My mom crying a lot, my dad being quieter than usual, and people coming in and out of our house with food and hugs and sad looks. I was too young to get the whole weight of it at the time, but I did know that she wasn't coming back. She had been in the hospital for a while after the crash, maybe a week or two. The accident wasn't right away fatal. I think that's what made it worse. Everyone thought maybe she'd pull through, but then she didn't. The part my mom told me about came after Amanda had died. Our aunt, my dad's sister, had been having her house worked on around that time. It wasn't being torn down or anything, but they were adding another bedroom and redoing part of the kitchen and garage. It was a bit of a mess. She lived with her husband and her 2 kids, little boys who Amanda used to babysit all the time. They adored her. My aunt was working during the day and her husband worked late hours, so construction happened while they were out. Just the crew at the house during the day. After Amanda passed, things kind of slowed down for a while. My aunt didn't rush the construction. I think grief hit her hard. Amanda had been close to her, babysat her kids almost every other weekend, just showed up and helped without asking for anything. I think they had a bond. So, a few weeks after the funeral, things started to pick up again at the house. The crew started working more regularly. Nothing unusual, just normal renovation work. Then one day my aunt got a call while she was at work. One of the construction guys told her that a teenage girl had been walking around the property during the day. He didn't say she was doing anything bad, just walking around quietly, sometimes inside the house, sometimes outside near the garage. He thought maybe she was a relative or a neighbor who didn't know the place was under renovation, but it had been happening more than once. He said he saw her 2 or 3 times in the same week. Never spoke, never caused trouble, just walked around like she belonged there. My aunt was confused. She asked him what the girl looked like, and that's where it got strange. He told her the girl had long brown hair, wore a red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. My aunt nearly dropped the phone. That was Amanda's usual outfit. Exactly. She didn't say anything right away, just thanked him and hung up. She told my uncle about it when she got home and pulled out a photo of Amanda. The same one she had from Amanda's last birthday. A selfie she took holding one of the boys, wearing that same outfit. She took it to the crew the next day and asked if that was the girl they'd seen. They all agreed immediately. That was her. One guy even said, "Yeah, she walked right past me near the back porch a few days ago." But Amanda had been dead for over 3 weeks by then. Now, this is where most stories would say something about ghosts or her spirit checking in or whatever, but that's not where my mom went with it, and it's not where I go with it either. What's disturbing to me is how real the sightings were. These weren't people who knew her or had seen her picture before. They were just guys doing their job. No reason to make up anything or imagine it. They all described the same thing before seeing her photo. My aunt called the police, not because of the paranormal aspect, but because there was someone walking around her house during the day while no one was home. The police came, asked some questions, looked around the property, but there wasn't much they could do. They found no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen or moved. The weirdest part was that one of the workers said the girl had been seen coming out of the garage, but the garage had been locked for weeks. My uncle hadn't even opened it since before the accident. After that, my aunt set up a couple of cameras outside the house. Motion activated once. For a few days, they caught nothing. Just footage of the crew working and a few birds flying around. Then, late one afternoon, the camera near the back porch caught something. Not clearly, just a blur of movement, a shape that could have been a person, but not enough to prove anything. Not enough to even really make sense of. No face, no clear figure, just a smudge that looked like someone walking out of the garage and into the yard. And then it was gone. The workers didn't see her again after that. Maybe the cameras scared whoever was off. Maybe it was someone who resembled Amanda and just wandered onto the property not knowing what kind of mess they were causing. Maybe one of the kids had found an old jacket and hat and was playing dress up outside, even though that doesn't make sense since the sightings were in the middle of the day when no one was home. Maybe someone found Amanda's old clothes somewhere and thought it would be funny to mess with the crew. I don't know. No one does. What sticks with me is how sure the construction guys were. They weren't shaken. They weren't trying to scare anyone. They just thought it was a girl from the neighborhood. That's what makes it creepy. The normalness of it. Like if it really had been Amanda, just walking around like nothing had happened. My aunt packed Amanda's clothes up not long after that and put them in storage. She said she couldn't look at them anymore. She also had the garage door replaced and changed the locks. Nothing ever happened again. No more sightings. No more calls. No more weird shapes on the cameras. The house is finished now. Has been for years. The kids are older. One of them is in college already. But when my mom told me this story, her voice was steady, like she wasn't trying to spook me or get a reaction. She just said it like a fact, something that happened. She still doesn't know what to make of it. No one in our family does. And that's really it. That's what makes the story so unsettling. It's not that something flew off the walls or a light flickered or a voice whispered from behind a door. It's that someone saw a girl walking around who shouldn't have been there. Someone who looked exactly like Amanda, in the same clothes, weeks after she died. No one ever figured out who it really was or how she got into a locked garage. No answers. Just a description that matched a dead girl and a few people who had no reason to lie. After that, my aunt never spoke about it again. Neither did the workers. My mom only told me because something reminded her of it. And now I can't forget it. I keep wondering if there was a real girl walking around that house that looked just like Amanda, or if our minds do strange things with grief, making us see what we're not ready to let go of. Either way, it happened, and it makes me feel cold whenever I think about it. Two years ago, my husband and I went to Boise, Idaho to see a Joe Rogan comedy show. It was supposed to be a short weekend getaway from our regular life in Utah. Just 2 nights. No kids, no responsibilities, just time together. We booked an Airbnb that looked nice enough in the photos. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't outrageously expensive either. What caught our attention was how big the house looked, like it belonged to someone well off. The listing mentioned a private room in the basement with a full bathroom, and that's all we needed. The host didn't communicate much. A few hours before check-in, he sent over the code to the front door. That was it. No welcome message, no instructions about parking or anything. He just told us he wouldn't be home all weekend, so we had the place to ourselves and to make ourselves comfortable. We figured he was traveling or maybe staying with someone else. Honestly, we didn't think too much of it. When we pulled up to the house, it was even bigger than the pictures. Huge front lawn, big wraparound porch, and a garage with expensive cars inside. Definitely the kind of place you'd expect someone with money to own. The neighborhood was quiet too. Clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, the kind of suburb where people wave to each other just because. We parked in the driveway and let ourselves in using the code. The door clicked open and we stepped inside to this echoey, wide-open living room with vaulted ceilings and a sweeping staircase that looked like something from a home design show. It didn't feel like an Airbnb. It felt like someone's real, lived-in home. We stood there for a few seconds, looking around, kind of unsure what to do. The ad said the room was in the basement, so we figured we'd just head down. The basement was finished and clean, with a living room area, a small kitchenette, and a bedroom tucked into the back. That room had a made bed and towels folded on the edge. The bathroom was right next to it. It matched the photos from the ad exactly. So we dropped our stuff and started to get ready. The show was that same night, and we didn't have a lot of time. While I was in the shower, my husband was sitting on the couch messing with his phone. When I got out and started drying off, he said the host had just messaged him saying we were in the wrong room and that we should be in the room upstairs. That stopped me. What did he mean the wrong room? And how would he even know where we were? He said he wasn't home. There weren't any cameras visible anywhere, at least not that we had seen. I wrapped the towel around me and just stood there for a second, unsettled. But we didn't argue. We were already halfway dressed anyway, so we just packed our things back up and made our way upstairs. That's when things started to feel strange. There were a bunch of bedrooms upstairs, maybe 4 or 5. We opened the doors one by one, trying to figure out which one we were supposed to stay in. Most of them looked like regular bedrooms. Made beds, shelves, some decorations, but nothing that screamed guest room. Then we opened the door to what was clearly the master bedroom. It was way bigger than the others. There were clean towels laid out on the bed and water bottles on each nightstand. It looked like it had been set up for someone to stay in, so we took that as our cue. But it was obvious this was not a guest room. This was someone's actual bedroom. There were clothes hanging in the closet, full drawers, makeup and jewelry in trays on top of the dresser, personal photos on the walls. Everything was neat and organized, but it was all lived in. This wasn't a space made for visitors. It felt like we were walking into someone's life, not just their house. Next to the bedroom was an office with papers stacked neatly on the desk, a computer setup with multiple monitors, and more framed photos. But the weirdest part was the dog stuff. There were bowls full of water and food near the door and a couple of dog toys scattered on the floor. The bowls didn't look dusty or unused. They looked freshly filled. But there was no dog. Not a sound, not a bark, nothing. We wandered the house for a bit, trying to piece together what was going on. The host said he wasn't going to be home, but he also hadn't cleaned out the most personal parts of the house. It didn't feel like someone preparing for guests. It felt like someone had just stepped out for a quick errand and left everything exactly as it was. We tried to shrug it off. We'd driven all the way from Utah. The comedy show was the reason we were there. We figured maybe the host was just a little weird about communication, or maybe this was normal for Airbnb stays in big homes. We got dressed and headed to the venue. The show was great, funny, energetic, exactly what we needed. For a little while we forgot about how weird the house felt. We came back late that night. The street was quiet, and the house looked the same as we left it. Nothing out of place. But the air inside felt heavier, like there was some kind of tension hanging there. I don't know how to describe it, just a feeling. We didn't hear anything, but both of us mentioned that it felt like someone had been there while we were gone. Nothing was missing, nothing was moved, but there was that sense like walking into a room right after someone else has left it. That warmth in the air, that faint scent of someone else's presence. We didn't talk much before bed. We both agreed we'd sleep in a little the next morning and then head back home to Utah. We climbed into bed in the master bedroom and tried to sleep, but the house made noises. Not the usual creaks. We could hear occasional thumps and something like shifting weight on the floors above or below us. We kept trying to explain it away. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was the HVAC system. Maybe the dog had been hiding and was now wandering around. But again, no dog ever showed itself. No panting, no scratching, no nails tapping on the wood floors. Sometime around 6 in the morning, we were both still half asleep when the silence broke. Loud barking, sharp and clear, came echoing down the hallway. Then the sound of paws, fast, heavy, running on the wood. The dog was real, and it was loose in the house. My husband jumped up and opened the bedroom door. Nothing was there, just the empty hallway and the same silence returning as quickly as the noise had come. He walked up and down the hall. I got up too, heart pounding. We checked every room, but there was nothing. No barking, no dog, no person. Just the bowls of food and water still there by the office, untouched. That was enough for us. We didn't even talk about it. We just started throwing our stuff back into our bags and loading the car. We were supposed to stay another night, maybe grab breakfast somewhere, but we couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. It felt like someone was there the whole time, watching us from a place just out of view. Or maybe they had been coming and going when we left. Either way, we no longer trusted the space. We didn't leave a review. We didn't message the host again. We just drove home in silence for the first few hours. Looking back, I still don't know what was going on in that house. Maybe the host lied about being gone. Maybe someone else was living there without permission. Maybe we interrupted something we weren't supposed to see. All I know is we were guests in a home that never actually felt empty. And that dog, the one we never saw but clearly heard, wasn't just some weird coincidence. I still check the locks twice every night before I go to bed. A couple of years ago, my friend Kate asked me to go with her to a party. The party was being thrown by a girl named Susan. Kate had gone to Catholic school with her from elementary through middle school, but once high school started, they drifted apart. Kate ended up going to public school, which is where I met her, and Susan had stayed on the Catholic school track. They still talked once in a while, but they weren't close like they used to be. I guess that's why Kate brought me along. Probably so she wouldn't feel so out of place around Susan's new circle of friends. It was Susan's birthday, and her parents had apparently rented out a cabin for the weekend to celebrate. From what Kate told me, they had done the same thing the year before, and Susan had taken advantage of it by throwing a party behind their backs. That party had been a hit, so this year she decided to do it again. Kate seemed excited about it, but I was a little more hesitant. I didn't know anyone except Kate, and I didn't have the kind of outgoing personality that made it easy to jump into a new group of people. I figured I'd hang close to Kate, have a few drinks, and make the best of it. I also couldn't ignore the horror movie vibes. Teenagers partying in a cabin in the woods, far from town. in the dead of winter. It practically screamed disaster. Kate and I even joked about it on the drive there. We arrived a little after 8 p.m. and it was already pitch black outside. The road getting there was narrow and surrounded by trees, the kind that looked like they'd swallow you whole if you wandered off the shoulder. When we pulled up to the cabin, there were a few cars already parked out front, but not many. We had to use our phone flashlights just to find the walkway up to the front door. The snow on the ground hadn't been shoveled, so we had to trudge through several inches of it, and the cold wind didn't help. Inside, the place looked normal enough. It was warm, the lights were low, music was playing, and there were already at least 20 people mingling around. Susan greeted Kate like they were still best friends, and I got introduced briefly, but then everyone went back to doing their own thing. The cabin had that old wood-paneled interior, a big stone fireplace, though it wasn't lit, and thick curtains drawn over all the windows. A long table in the corner was crowded with bottles and solo cups, and the smell of cheap alcohol hung heavy in the air. For the first hour or so, everything was pretty uneventful. Kate and I stuck together, occasionally making awkward small talk with strangers. We found a couch to sit on for a bit, and I people-watched while sipping a warm beer someone handed me. What I started noticing, though, was this weird divide in the party. There seemed to be two groups. The ones who were clearly Susan's Catholic school friends, dressed kind of preppy, acting overly polite, laughing a little too loud. And then this other group. They were louder, rougher around the edges, and clearly more into drinking than mingling. There was one guy who caught my attention. He had the name of the city we lived in tattooed across his neck in big, messy letters. Kate and I exchanged glances when we saw it. We weren't laughing exactly, but it gave off this vibe that maybe he was trying a little too hard to seem tough. Still, we couldn't help but wonder if he might actually be dangerous. The whole group he came with had that energy, like they weren't there to celebrate a birthday, but just to get drunk and stir things up. At some point, I guess tension started rising. I didn't catch the beginning of it, but from what I gathered later, that rougher group had shown up without bringing anything. No drinks, no food, and we're just going through everyone else's stuff. People started whispering that one of them might be on probation, and someone else said Susan hadn't even invited all of them, just the one girl who brought the rest along. The plan to get them to leave was weirdly simple. One of the Catholic school guys announced that a ranger or caretaker or someone like that was going to be driving by the cabin soon, checking for cars and noise complaints. He made it sound official, like if there were too many people or cars, someone could get into serious trouble. It worked surprisingly. The group grumbled a bit, but they left. There were about 5 guys and 1 girl. I remember feeling relieved. The tension in the room dropped, and people started laughing again. Kate and I stood by the kitchen chatting with a couple of people, when suddenly that same girl who had just left with the group walked back in. She stood near the doorway and loudly said she just wanted to say happy birthday. It didn't sound sincere. It sounded like she wanted everyone to hear her. Before anyone could even process what was happening, we heard a loud, crashing sound from the back of the cabin. It was a window, then another, then yelling. Someone shouted something about people trying to get back in. Glass was breaking, people were screaming, and everything dissolved into chaos. I just stood there frozen. Kate grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the front of the cabin, away from the noise. I couldn't even think. All I remember was someone yelling that at least one of the guys had a gun. That's when it felt real. All the joking about horror movies disappeared in an instant. Most of us stayed inside the main room, too afraid to go anywhere else. A couple of guys went outside to see what was happening, but they came back quickly and said the group had taken off. Apparently, they didn't actually come inside, just broke the windows and screamed threats before running off into the woods. Still, nobody wanted to take any chances. People started packing up and leaving soon after that. I remember 3 girls who had originally planned to stay the night. They had their sleeping bags and backpacks piled in their arms and were heading out the front door when a scream echoed through the trees. All 3 of them jumped and practically sprinted back inside. It turned out the scream was just a new girl arriving. She'd seen her friend outside and screamed in excitement. That kind of summed up the whole night. Too much tension, not enough sense. One of the girls started crying after that. It was just too much. Kate and I stayed behind for a while longer. Susan was clearly shaken, and we didn't want to leave her alone. Most of the people were gone by then, Just a handful stuck around, planning to spend the night in sleeping bags and on couches. Around 2 a.m., we finally left. We debated calling the cops, but nobody wanted to get in trouble. There had been a lot of underage drinking, and Susan was terrified her parents would find out. She said she'd just lie about how the windows got broken, blame it on a tree branch or a deer or something. The drive back was dead silent. Kate and I were both on edge, replaying everything in our heads. I kept staring out the window, half expecting to see someone standing by the road. But we didn't. Nothing happened after that. The group never came back, and nobody got hurt. But it stuck with me. Not because of what actually happened, although it was scary, but because it could have been worse. Way worse. There were a lot of what-ifs. What if someone had a gun and used it? What if someone had gotten too drunk to react in time? What if Susan's parents had walked in during the chaos? It was one of those nights where you look back and realize how close everything came to going horribly wrong. And even though we laughed about it later, there was still this part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something about that night wasn't just a bad experience. It was a warning. A cabin in the woods, full of teenagers, some drunk, some angry, some completely unaware of the danger they were in. That night was a mess, but it could have easily turned into something much darker. I've never gone back to that area since. I don't think I ever will. It was just after 1 a.m., and I was hauling a load of farm equipment across Arizona, heading east toward New Mexico. The highway was dead quiet. Nothing but blacktops stretching for miles with scrub brush on both sides and an endless desert sky above. My CB radio had gone silent about 45 minutes earlier, and I hadn't seen a single car or truck since. Just me, the road, and the steady hum of my engine. The night air outside was still and dry. My headlights cut through the darkness like knives, illuminating patches of cracked asphalt and the occasional coyote crossing in the distance. I'd been driving straight for hours, too wired on coffee to pull over, too tired to keep my mind from wandering. That stretch of highway always gave me a weird feeling. No cell signal, no towns for miles, just open nothing. Then I saw the lights. Flashing blue and red filled my mirrors suddenly, bouncing off the side of my trailer. At first, I thought maybe I was finally seeing another vehicle, maybe even getting pulled over for a taillight or something. I slowed and eased over to the shoulder. The lights kept flashing as I stopped completely, but right away, something felt wrong. There wasn't a siren, just the lights. And the vehicle behind me wasn't a marked patrol car. It was a black SUV, dusty and unmarked, with the light suction cupped to the roof like some kind of aftermarket setup. No logos, no decals, just lights. Might get twisted a little. I kept the engine running and watched the side mirror. The SUV's door opened and a man stepped out. He looked like he could have been law enforcement. Jeans, boots, a sheriff-style brown jacket. But there was no visible badge, no body cam, no utility belt, nothing that marked him as legit. He walked toward me slowly, kind of stiff. His hands were twitchy. He kept glancing over his shoulder toward the tree, lying across the road. I couldn't explain why, but something about the way he moved, it was like he was trying to act calm and controlled but couldn't quite pull it off. He came up to my window, and I rolled it down halfway. My hand hovered near the door lock switch just in case. He didn't say much, just motioned for my license and DOT papers. I reached toward my glove box slowly, buying time. I looked him over in the mirror. That's when I saw it. His jacket pocket was wide open, and inside was a roll of duct tape, and sticking just above it, the black handle of what looked like a fixed blade knife. Not something you'd expect on a cop, at least not one making a routine stop. He noticed me looking. He shifted slightly to block my view and told me again to get the papers. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it had an edge, like someone trying not to lose patience. And all the while, he kept glancing nervously at the tree line. Not just a quick check either. It was like he was waiting for something. Or someone. That's when I knew this wasn't right. I told him I had to get the papers from the back, that they were in a binder behind the seats. He nodded and stepped back, one hand resting near the pocket with the knife. I slowly rolled up the window. As soon as it clicked shut, I hit the lock button, dropped the truck into gear, and floored it. The tires kicked gravel as I pulled out, and the trailer wobbled a bit before catching straight. I didn't look back. I didn't check the mirror. I just drove. My heart was pounding, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I kept expecting gunshots or a pursuit, but nothing came. No headlights in the mirror. No sign of him following. Just the highway stretching ahead and the silence of the desert pressing in on all sides. I didn't let off the gas for a long time. Eventually, after what felt like forever, but was probably only 20 minutes, I saw signs for a way station up ahead. The place looked lit up like a Christmas tree. Big halogens, orange safety cones, real patrol cars parked outside. I pulled in fast and parked awkwardly near the office building. My legs were shaking when I climbed out of the cab. Inside, 2 uniformed state troopers were sitting at a desk drinking coffee. They looked up when I came in. I must have looked like hell because one of them stood up right away and asked if I was okay. I told them everything, where I was, what time it happened, what the man looked like, the SUV, the fake lights, the knife, the duct tape. One of the officers got real serious, grabbed a notepad, and started taking notes. The other made a call on the radio. They checked with dispatch and confirmed there were no officers patrolling that area of highway at that time. None. They didn't even have anyone assigned to that stretch after 10 p.m. because it was supposed to be low risk. No traffic, no incidents. They said they'd been getting strange reports lately from truckers. Unmarked vehicles, suspicious stops, people trying to impersonate officers. Nothing had come of it yet, but they were definitely concerned now. They walked out to check my rig just to make sure I hadn't been followed. One of them checked the trailer, the other took down the plate numbers. I stayed close, hands still trembling, trying to focus on the quiet sounds of the station instead of what I'd just escaped. They offered to let me rest there for a while, even said I could call someone if I needed to. But I just wanted to get moving again. The adrenaline was wearing off, and in its place was a cold, creeping feeling, like I'd been inches from something awful and barely got away. I thought about that guy a lot afterward. Who he was, what he was doing out there, the duct tape, the knife, the fake lights, the way he kept looking at the trees like someone or something was watching him or maybe waiting to help him. It made my skin crawl. What would have happened if I'd stepped out of the cab? If I'd gone around back to get the papers? If I hadn't locked the door fast enough? Would he have pulled a knife right there? Or maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe whoever he kept looking at in the trees was going to join in once I stepped away from the cab. I don't know. I don't want to know. I filed a full report the next day at the next state trooper post. They said they'd forward everything to the proper offices. I never heard back. No follow-up. No arrests. No updates. Just silence. Every time I drive that stretch now, I keep my doors locked, my eyes peeled, and my documents right up front where I don't have to move from my seat. I haven't seen that SUV again, but that night stuck with me. It changed how I look at the road, especially at night, especially in places where help is far away. It reminded me that not everything dangerous on the road is hiding in shadows. Sometimes it's standing right in front of you, pretending to protect and serve. I can't believe this story is over 10 years old now. Time really does fly if you're not paying attention. Thinking back on it still gives me this strange, sick feeling in my stomach. It's probably one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me. And at the time, it was absolutely terrifying. Back then, I had just started dating this girl I was really into. We hadn't been seeing each other for very long, maybe a couple of months, but I was already getting frustrated. She was always busy. Between school, work, and whatever else she had going on, it felt like I was constantly being pushed to the back burner. I still lived at home with my parents, and so did she. So getting alone time wasn't really a thing. We would text and talk on the phone, but seeing her in person felt like pulling teeth. Every time I tried to make plans, she already had something else going on. Eventually, I just got tired of it. One weekend, I told her how I felt. I didn't yell or anything, I just let it out. I told her it felt like I wasn't a priority, that I was getting annoyed and starting to feel like an afterthought. She was quiet for a while and then finally said she understood. But she had already made plans for that weekend. She was going on a camping trip with her friends. That hit me the wrong way. Here I was, trying to fight for just a few hours together, and she was going off for an entire weekend with her friends. I won't lie, I was pretty angry. I was even thinking about breaking up with her before things got too deep. But then, right as she was leaving for the trip, she texted me, said she was sorry again, and that one of her friends had mentioned I could come too if I wanted. It was obviously last minute. I remember staring at the message for a while. I didn't like camping. I still don't. But I figured if I didn't go, I wouldn't see her at all for another week. So I grabbed my bag, tossed in whatever I thought I'd need for a night outdoors, and got in the car. The campsite was only about 40 minutes away, so it wasn't a huge deal. When I got there, I was surprised by what it looked like. It wasn't the deep woods camping I had in my head. It was this large open clearing surrounded by trees, but very clearly a public space. There were probably 20 or 30 other groups there. Some had big RVs, others had tents. It was kind of a mix. The area felt more like a giant picnic field than a wilderness campsite. It didn't feel private at all, and I kind of hated it first. But I was there to see my girlfriend, not to critique the camping setup. That's when I met her friends for the first time. They were all way more outgoing than she was. Loud, funny, kind of wild. But they seemed like good people. They welcomed me right away, offered me some food, handed me a drink, and just folded me into whatever they were doing. I started to relax a little. After we ate, I wandered a bit and found a bunch of trails that went off into the woods. That was the first time it actually started to feel like camping to me. Those trails went on longer than I expected. There were signs, but they were far apart, and the deeper you went, the more isolated it felt. That night, after it got dark, we grilled some food on a little portable grill someone brought. We sat in camp chairs and played card games under the glow of a few battery-powered lanterns. People were drinking beer out of those stainless steel flasks or cups since open containers weren't allowed. It was chill. Around 11, though, something weird happened. Two people showed up, a man and a woman, both in uniforms. Not like cops, but close. They said they were responsible for managing the campsite and the trails. I guess you call them rangers. They had these big flashlights and were shining them into our tents and around the campfire, kind of aggressively. One of the guys in our group asked what was going on, and the woman snapped that there was a strict 10 p.m. curfew. No lights, no noise, everyone in bed. We all looked at each other like, what? It was a Saturday night, and we were at a public campsite. No one had mentioned any kind of curfew. We weren't being obnoxiously loud. A few of us laughed, thinking they were joking, but they weren't. The woman especially was intense. She raised her voice and started talking to us like we were little kids. Said she'd be doing rounds, and if anyone was still awake next time she came by, they'd be kicked out. We were annoyed, but we didn't want to push our luck. We'd been drinking, and if they kicked us out, none of us were in a position to drive. One of the girls whispered that we could just keep playing cards in her tent quietly, but the ranger overheard and doubled back. Said absolutely no talking, no lights, no nothing. It felt ridiculous, but we went along with it. One by one, people trickled into their tents. It got quiet. I stayed up for a while with my girlfriend. We talked in low voices, just enjoying the rare moment of privacy. Then she leaned in and whispered that we should sneak onto one of the trails. She said it would be the only place we could be alone without anyone telling us to shut up or go to sleep. I hesitated for maybe half a second, then agreed. We slipped out of the tent and crept across the edge of the clearing. We stayed low, trying not to draw attention. Once we were on one of the trails and far enough and that the noise from the main camp had faded, we stopped. It was dark, really dark, but we had a small flashlight with us. The trees were thick on both sides, but the trail was easy enough to follow. We weren't doing anything crazy, just standing close, finally alone, finally able to talk and hold each other without someone barking rules at us. Then we heard it, a sharp voice cutting through the silence. Hey, it wasn't a shout, but it was loud enough that it stopped us cold. We both froze. My heart jumped. It wasn't the voice of a ranger. It sounded different, male, older, and there was something strange in the tone, like it was trying to sound casual, but had a weird edge. We didn't say anything, just stayed still. Then it came again. I know you're here. I just want to say hi. I looked around, trying to see where the voice was coming from. It was hard to tell. Everything looked like shadows. But then I saw him. A man was standing in the middle of the trail. Short, stocky build, wearing a long white t-shirt that looked too big for him. He had a small flashlight in one hand, pointed at the ground. I don't know how he saw us, but when I peeked around the tree, he turned his head like he was waiting for me to look. Our eyes met. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was forced, wide, and wrong. He lifted his other hand and said, "Hey, buddy, I got something for you." My brain was screaming to run, but I was frozen. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I got all this money in my pocket. My ex-wife's gonna take it. I want to give it away before she finds out. Come over here and grab it, would you?" There was nothing in his hand. He just held it out, palm up, like he was expecting me to walk over and take something invisible. He was about 20 feet away, close enough to see, but not close enough to grab us. I looked at my girlfriend and mouthed one word: "Run." She took off without hesitation. I turned and sprinted after her. As I pushed off, I heard the man shout, "No!" And there was a sudden movement, like he lunged forward. But I didn't look back. We ran full speed through the trail, crashing through brush, and probably stepping on rocks or roots. All I could think about was getting back to the main clearing. When we got back to camp, we went straight to our tent. I was shaking. My girlfriend was trying not to cry. We waited. After about an hour, we saw the rangers again doing a slow walk around. I went up to the woman from before and told her I had seen someone wandering the woods. I lied and said I saw him from the tent. Didn't mention that we had broken curfew and gone on the trail. To my surprise, she took it seriously. She got on the radio and called someone. A few minutes later, a couple of police officers showed up. They asked us some questions, then headed off into the woods with flashlights. They were out there for maybe half an hour. Eventually, they came back and said they didn't find anyone, but they'd keep an eye out. Nothing ever came of it. That was the last I saw of the man. We didn't sleep much the rest of the night. Every sound, every rustle in the trees made me jump. I kept my eyes on the trail for hours, just waiting to see him again. He never came back. To this day, I have no idea who he was, what he wanted, or if he had really been watching us the whole time. But I do know that something about him was deeply wrong. Not just drunk or mentally ill, there was something else. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I never went back to that campsite. I still hate camping. Every summer, when people start talking about going outdoors and setting up tents, my mind drifts back to that night, to that man, that smile, and that awful feeling in my gut that if we had waited even a few more seconds before running, things could have ended very differently. I've been driving for hours, longer than I should have. My eyes were starting to burn, and I'd already slapped my face twice to keep myself from dozing off at the wheel. The road was mostly dark, the kind of dark where your headlights only light up the immediate strip ahead and everything else feels like a black void. It was one of those stretches of highway that feels endless, no real towns for miles, just occasional green signs pointing to dirt roads or gas stations that might be closed. I knew I couldn't make another hour. I was too tired. My head was heavy, and I'd already drifted too close to the shoulder once. That scared me enough to make me look for the next place to stop. I didn't care if it was clean or comfortable. I just needed a bed, or at the very least, a place to park and close my eyes. Around midnight, I spotted a small motel off the side of the highway. The kind of place that looks like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Flat roof, faded paint, a half-lit sign with a couple letters burned out. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, and there were weeds growing through the cement in places. I didn't care. I slowed down, pulled in, and parked under a flickering yellow light. My car was of only 3 there. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, rubbing my eyes and checking my phone. No messages. A few missed calls from earlier in the evening, nothing urgent. I wasn't even going to check in right away. I just wanted a second to breathe and stretch before walking into the office. I figured I'd take a minute, maybe scroll a bit to feel normal before going inside. That's when I noticed it. The rooms all faced the lot in a long, narrow strip. One story, all identical windows, all the same thick brown curtains. But every single one of those curtains was slightly open. Not wide, not obvious, just a small part pulled back, maybe a few inches. Just enough for someone to peek out. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe they'd been cleaned and not closed properly. Maybe guests had left them like that. But it was all of them. Every room. 20 or so doors. 20 slightly parted curtains. And that's when it started to feel off. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. No movement, no faces, just those narrow slits. I looked away for a second, trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe even something normal I'd never noticed at other motels. But then something shifted behind the curtain of the room closest to my car. It was quick, but clear. A shadow, just enough movement to catch in the corner of my eye. I looked straight at it and froze. Nothing moved after that. No footsteps. No hand pulling the curtain back further. But I knew I'd seen it. Something had shifted behind that curtain, and it hadn't been my reflection or the wind. The window was too high for either to make sense. Suddenly, everything about that motel felt wrong. The cracked parking lot, the flickering light above me, the dead silence around the whole place. I couldn't hear anything. Not bugs, not cars on the highway, not even wind. Just my own breath and the low hum of my engine cooling. I stared at the curtain for a few more seconds, almost waiting for something else to move. But nothing did. No signs of life. No signs of anything, really. And that made it worse. If I'd seen someone clearly, even just an old man watching TV or someone walking past the window, it might have grounded me, made me feel like I was just imagining things. But the stillness, the sameness of all those peeking curtains, it was unsettling in a way I didn't know how to explain. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't even reach for my bag or think about going to the office. I just started the engine again, trying to keep my breathing normal. I didn't peel out or anything. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I just slowly backed out of the spot and turned toward the exit. I glanced back once in the mirror and, I swear, just for a second, I thought one of the curtains moved again. I didn't look a second time. I pulled out onto the highway and headed in the opposite direction. I ended up at a truck stop about 20 minutes down the road. It was bright, busy enough for the hour, with a few semis parked and a diner still serving coffee and pie to a couple drivers. I parked close to the building under one of the big overhead lights and locked the doors. I reclined the seat just a little and tried to relax. I didn't even want to go inside. I felt safer just staying in the car where I could see everything. But even then, my nerves were shot. My mind kept replaying that line of windows. All those curtains slightly open. All those empty rooms. The quiet. The shadow. I didn't sleep much. Maybe 20 or 30 minutes, in patches. Every time I dozed off, I'd jolt awake thinking I saw something outside the car. I finally went inside the diner around 2:30 a.m. and got a coffee and sat near the window, just watching the lot. I stayed there until the sun started to come up, and then I felt like I could breathe again. Later that morning, I looked up that motel online. I found it easily. It was still listed, but there weren't many reviews. The ones I did find were strange. Nothing too specific, just things like odd vibe or didn't feel comfortable staying. One review mentioned the curtains too, saying it felt like someone was always watching. That was it. No details, no warnings. Just uneasy people who probably did the same thing I did. Pulled in, stayed a minute, and left. I kept driving that day, didn't talk to anyone about it. It sounds small when I say it out loud. A line of open curtains, a shadow, no real danger. But something was wrong there. I know it. I could feel in my gut, in that deep, primal way you feel when you're not safe. Whatever that place was, whoever was in those rooms or behind those windows, I'm glad I didn't stay. And now, whenever I drive late at night, no matter how tired I am, I think twice before pulling into a place like that. I'd rather sleep in my car at a gas station with lights and cameras and people around than trust a silent motel that stares at you through its curtains. I work night shifts at a warehouse about 40 minutes outside of town. It's mostly quiet work, loading trucks, and organizing freight, and I usually get off around 3 a.m. That night wasn't much different, just me, the hum of forklifts, and the radio crackling low in the background. By the time I clocked out, I was bone tired. I just wanted to get home, shower, and sleep. The drive back takes me down a long, two-lane country road with barely any streetlights. It cuts through farmland and patches of woods. No gas stations, no houses close to the road, just a few gravel pull-offs and old barns. It's usually empty that late, and I know it like the back of my hand. I've been doing this drive for years. About 10 minutes into the drive, I turned onto the county road like I always do. That's when I noticed the headlights in my mirror. A white van had pulled out onto the road behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. A lot of farmhands use old vans or trucks, and sometimes I'll see another vehicle or two heading home at the same time. But something about this van caught my eye. It didn't have any license plates. No front plate, and when I checked again, nothing on the back either. It stayed about 4 or 5 car lengths behind me. Not too close, but not far enough for comfort. I let it go for a couple of miles, thinking maybe it was just a coincidence. But something in my gut was twitching. I slowed down a little. The van did too. I sped up just a touch. It matched my speed perfectly. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Long shifts, lack of sleep, empty road. Maybe I was just overthinking. Still, I decided to switch lanes at the next passing section just to see. I moved to the left lane, even though there was no one else around. The van moved left too. I moved back to the right. So did the van. I could feel my pulse starting to pick up. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I turned off the radio and rolled my window down a crack. I needed to be fully alert. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't calm me down. I was starting to sweat. About 5 minutes later, I made a sudden turn onto a side road that looped back toward the main highway. I didn't use my blinker. The van followed. No hesitation. Just turned right behind me like it already knew the move I'd make. That's when I knew for sure something was wrong. I kept driving, making turn after turn, taking a few sharp ones that would have been easy to miss in the dark. But the van stuck behind me the whole time, never gaining, never falling back. No headlights flickering, no sign of radio interference. Just silent pursuit. At one point, I pulled into a small gravel lot near an old closed-down gas station. I left my car running, lights on, and waited. The van slowed down, passed me slowly, and continued down the road. I let out a shaky breath, but I didn't relax. Something told me not to move just yet. Sure enough, about 30 seconds later, I saw the headlights turn around up ahead. The van came back and pulled into the same lot I was in. No hesitation. No confusion, like they knew I'd be there. I didn't wait to see who got out. I threw my car in a drive and peeled out of that lot, gravel kicking up behind me. I sped down the road, heart hammering. I took 2 more turns, trying to lose them. Finally, I saw the main highway coming up. I merged onto it and floored it, watching the mirror the whole time. Nothing. A few minutes later, I caught sight of the van again. It had pulled off to the side of the road in an open field, just sitting there. No lights, no movement. It was angled toward the road, like it had parked there to wait or watch. I drove past without slowing down, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My chest was tight, and I could feel a tremor in my leg on the gas pedal. I kept watching the mirror until the highway curved enough to lose sight of the field. The van didn't follow me again. When I got home, I sat in my car for a full minute before going inside. My hands were shaking. I didn't call anyone. I didn't file a report. I just went inside, locked every door, and checked the windows twice. I didn't sleep much that morning. Days went by, and I kept thinking about that van. It wasn't just some drunk driver or someone lost on a back road. Whoever was in that van was following me on purpose. They knew how to trail without tailgating. They matched my every move like they'd done it before. That's what got under my skin the most. It felt practiced. About a week later, I was reading local posts on a neighborhood app. That's when I saw it. A woman had written about something that happened while she was out walking her dog late at night near the edge of town, not too far from where I drive home. A white van had pulled up slowly behind her. No plats. She said the side door slid open while it was still moving. She screamed, and her dog barked like hell. The van took off before she could get a good look at the driver. But the details were the same. White van, no plats, silent, no logos, no windows in the back. That stopped me cold. Same description, same behavior, same area. That could have been me. I read the post again and again. She had reported it to the police, but so far nothing had come from it. No cameras caught it. No one saw the van leave. They told her they'd look into it, but she hadn't heard back. A few people commented on the post, saying they'd seen similar vans late at night. One guy said he saw one parked behind an abandoned barn last month, but thought it was just someone camping out. Another mentioned seeing one on his trail cam, parked in the woods behind his property at 4 a.m., just sitting there. I haven't seen the van again since that night, but I changed my route. I don't take the country roads anymore. I stick to the main highway, even if it adds 20 minutes to my drive. I don't park in dark lots or pull-offs. I watch every vehicle that comes up behind me. I memorize plates. I keep my doors locked at all times, even while driving. And I started carrying something under my seat, just in case. There was nothing supernatural about it. No shadows in the trees, no voices in my head. Just a van, just a person, or maybe more than one, who knew what they were doing and didn't care about being seen. Someone who was out there, maybe looking for someone walking alone, or someone coming home from a late shift on an empty road. Someone like me. I was lucky. I don't think they expected me to react the way I did. Maybe they were waiting for me to stop, or stall, or get out of the car. Maybe they thought I'd be too tired to notice or too slow to act. I don't know what their plan was that night, but I know I wasn't imagining it. Every time I pass a white van now, especially one with no plates, I feel my chest tighten again. And I remember that feel, that dark shape just sitting there in the grass, watching the road, waiting for someone else. When I was in high school, I had a close friend named Evan who lived 2 houses down from me. We weren't in the same classes, but we hung out nearly every day after school. His house was small but cozy, with that old wood paneling smell and walls that creaked when the wind picked up. I remember his place mostly because of what stood right next to it, a house that, for as long as I could remember, never had the same family for more than a few months. That house was strange. Not in a haunted house kind of way, it was just off. People would move in with smiles and new paint on the walls and furniture being carried inside. A few months later, usually less, they'd vanish. Literally vanish. No for sale signs, no moving trucks, no goodbyes. One day the lights would be on, and the next, the place would be dark and empty again. Over and over. It was like the house just didn't want people to stay. I remember one Saturday night, early December, maybe 9 or 10 p.m., Evan and I were bored. It was cold out, but neither of us wanted to stay in playing Xbox or watching the same movies. So we were just walking up and down his block, bundled up in hoodies, kicking dead leaves, and talking about nothing. That's when Evan brought it up again. The house. He said it had been empty for months now. No cars, no movement, no lights. He said the side gate was always unlocked, and he wanted to go inside, just to see. I was hesitant. I mean, it was trespassing, but I didn't want to be the one who'd chicken out either. So I followed him. We went around the back of the house, using a narrow strip of grass between his fence and the neighbor's side yard. The backyard was plain, patchy lawn, an old wooden deck, and a detached garage that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The sliding glass door on the back of the house was locked, as expected, but then Evan pointed out the dog door at the bottom. It was bigger than most I'd seen, a rectangle of rubber flaps with scratches all over it. I laughed, not really thinking he'd try it. But sure enough, he dropped to his knees, wriggled his way through, and popped up inside like it was nothing. Then he unlocked the door from the inside and let me in. The air inside was stale. No smell of food, no scent of cleaning products or anything human. Just cold air, dust, and wood. The power was off, so the only light came from the tall street lamp shining through a large picture window in the kitchen. The kitchen itself was old but nice. Real wood cabinets, tile counters, a small built-in breakfast nook with a wooden bench and table under the window. We walked through the first floor, just kind of poking around. The furniture was all gone, but there were signs of people having lived there. Nail holes in the walls, scuff marks on the baseboards, even a couple of forgotten toys in one of the closets. We ended up sitting in the kitchen, cross-legged on the tile floor, facing that breakfast table. It was so quiet in there you could hear the ticking of my watch. We weren't really talking about anything important, just school, music, random stuff. We weren't even using flashlights, just sitting there in the semi-darkness, that street light casting long shadows through the window and onto the floor. That's when everything went wrong. I don't remember any warning. I didn't hear a sound, didn't feel anything change. One second I was looking at Evan, and the next, everything went black. But it wasn't just my sight. My entire body felt like it had been dropped into freezing water. My skin burned with cold, but not from air. It was like something had poured inside me. My chest tightened, and I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut. I remember opening my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My tongue felt frozen. My limbs were heavy. I couldn't tell where I was or if I was still sitting down. My body felt hollow and full at the same time, like something was pushing against my insides. Then I felt Evan's hand grab mine hard, really hard. He yanked me, dragging me in some direction, and I didn't resist. I couldn't even think. My body just followed. I stumbled after him, blind and freezing, my shoes slipping on the floor or maybe outside, I didn't even know. Then light. My vision came back slowly, like someone was turning up the brightness on a screen. The cold didn't leave all at once. It crawled out of me, inch by inch, until I was shivering in a way that felt more natural. We were outside, under the street lamp. The light from it looked yellow and almost soft, like a warm blanket compared to what I just felt. I was bent over, trying to catch my breath, my teeth chattering. Evan was standing there, wide-eyed, like he couldn't believe what just happened. He didn't speak, and neither did I. Not for a long time. Eventually, I asked him what had happened. He hesitated, then told me. He said while I was talking, something moved under the table. Not like a shadow or an animal. He said it was a figure, a girl, maybe, but all black. Not like someone wearing black, but black like empty space. No face, no eyes, no mouth. It crawled out slowly and sat right on top of me. He said I didn't react. My eyes were open, but I looked blind. I was groping the air like I couldn't tell, where I was like I'd gone completely disconnected from the room around me. That's when he grabbed me and pulled me out. I didn't say much in response. What was there to say? I didn't see anything, but I felt it. Whatever that blackness was, it wasn't just in my head. I wasn't imagining it. The cold was too real. The pressure in my chest, the heaviness in my limbs, I couldn't explain it away. The walk home was quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my lamp on, pulled the covers up to my chin, and stared at the corner of my room for hours. I couldn't stop thinking about it. For days after, I had this unsettled feeling, like I was forgetting something important, like something was still with me, just out of reach. I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at random noises, and flinching every time the furnace kicked on. The worst part was how normal everything looked the next day. The house next door was still there, still empty, still quiet. It didn't look like anything had happened, but I couldn't go near it. Even walking on the same side of the street made my skin crawl. I avoided it completely after that. Years have passed since that night. Evan and I are still friends, though we don't bring it up much. When we do, it's brief. Just a look or a short comment, like we're both afraid talking about it too much might make it come back. I still don't know what exactly happened in that house. I don't have an explanation, but know what I felt, and I know it wasn't normal. It wasn't a ghost or anything like that. It was something deeper, something that made my body shut down and my brain go numb. Something I never want to feel again. That house still stands. New people move in. They leave. Always within 6 months. I don't ask questions anymore. I don't want to know. And I never went back inside. Not once. I was hauling a load of construction gear west out of Denver, heading through the Rockies on a long overnight run. The job was supposed to be simple. Pick up at 5 p.m., drop off in Salt Lake the next morning. Nothing unusual. I'd done this route plenty of times before. It's a lonely stretch, especially once you get out past Idaho Springs. The road winds hard through the mountains, to a lane in most places with barely any shoulder and just endless drop-offs on one side, rock walls on the other. After a certain point, the radio gives up and your phone turns into a brick. The only sound is your engine and the tires chewing up the road. It was cold that night, colder than usual for early fall. The kind of cold that sinks into the cab, even with the heat blasting. I had my thermos full of black coffee, the dash lights dimmed low, and nothing ahead of me but darkness and switchbacks. The clock on the dash read 2:07 a.m. I remember because I just glanced at it before hitting another sharp turn. The kind where you slow, almost a crawl, or risk sliding right into the guardrail, or off the edge if you're unlucky. That's when I saw him. Just a quick flash of movement on the shoulder ahead. At first I thought it was an animal, but as I rolled closer, I realized it was a person, looked like a man standing on the narrow gravel shoulder. He was facing the road, but not directly looking at me. No flashlight, no visible car nearby, just standing there like he'd been dropped out of the sky. I slowed down. Habit, I guess. I never pick up hitchhikers, especially not out there. Too many stories, too many variables. I wasn't about to stop, but I did ease off the throttle and roll by slow, try and get a good look. He had a jacket on, torn and dirty, and jeans that looked stiff from mud or something worse. But I couldn't see his face. Just the hood pulled up and his left hand raised, thumb barely sticking out. I rolled past him and checked my mirror. That's when I saw the other movement, something quick low, right along the side of the trailer. I looked again, squinting at the convex mirror mounted onto the main one, the one that shows your trailer's blind spots. Clear as day, I saw someone ducking down low between the cab and the front of the trailer. Not the guy I passed. This one moved too fast. My first thought was that it was a setup. Maybe two of them, maybe more, trying to jack the rig or ride underneath. I hit the brakes, harder than I meant to. The whole rig shuddered and hissed, the trailer groaning slightly as it settled. I put the hazards on, grabbed my flashlight from the side pocket, and got out into the freezing air. The mountain was dead silent, except for the tick of my engine cooling and the wind rustling through pine. I walked around the front first, scanning the shoulder and the trees nearby. Nothing but darkness. I walked the whole length of the trailer, light in my left hand, the other holding the small crowbar I keep wedged in the cab door. I checked the undercarriage, peered under the axles, even climbed up a bit to shine the light over the fifth wheel. Nothing. Nobody. No sign of anyone at all. I stood there a moment, my breath fogging in front of me. My spine was tight, stomach flipping with that low, dull panic you get when something doesn't add up. I walked back to the driver's side and opened the cab door. Climbed back in, locked it, then fired the engine back up. Still nothing on the road behind me. Just winding blacktop and a few reflectors blinking in the dark. I leaned forward and hit play on the dash cam, just to check. It records in a loop. Night vision kicks in after dark. The footage rolled back about 5 minutes. The guy standing on the shoulder was there. I paused it and zoomed in. His face was just shadow had drawn tight. I scrubbed forward and saw the moment I passed him. Then I saw it. Right at the edge of the screen, as the truck passed the guy, a figure darted from the tree line, crouched low, almost crawling, and disappeared into the space between my cab and trailer. He was fast, too fast. I rewound it twice, just to be sure. He had a coat on, but no hood. Short hair. Looked like he was wearing gloves. He kept low, stayed close to the truck. Not just someone running across the road. This guy meant to get on. I froze the frame and stared at it. My cab light buzzed faintly above me. I felt my stomach drop. I could still hear the tick-tick of the engine cooling and the distant groan of a wind gust pushing through the canyon. I tried to send the clip to my dispatcher. No signal, not even a single bar. I was out of luck until I hit cell range again, which wouldn't be for at least 30 or 40 miles. I kept checking the mirrors after that. Every turn, every bump, every reflection in the rear glass made me twitch. I even called out once or twice, hoping I was just losing my mind. But I didn't hear or see anything the rest of the way. When I finally hit the station in Rifle, I parked near the fuel pumps and went to check the footage again. I wanted to show it to someone, anyone. But when I opened the file, it was gone. Or rather, it was there but corrupted. Just a few seconds of gray static where the footage had been. The rest of the file was normal, except that one stretch. All it showed was digital snow and a high-pitched whine like bad tape. I didn't say anything, just stood there staring at the screen like it owed me an explanation. I finished the run and made my drop on time, but I didn't take that route again for months. I kept driving, kept working, but I started doing little things different. I checked my fifth will lock more often. I started putting a strip of duct tape across the door seam when I parked, so I'd know if someone opened it. I rigged a second dash cam in the sleeper. But most of all, I started watching that side mirror. Not just checking it, watching it. Obsessively, sometimes. I still do. Doesn't matter if I'm in the desert, in a city, in daylight. I glance at it every few seconds like clockwork, looking for movement, looking for shapes that shouldn't be there. Sometimes I wonder if it was just a drifter trying to hitch a ride or hide out. Maybe he thought I'd never notice. Maybe he bailed out when I stopped and ran off into the woods. Maybe, but that doesn't explain how he moved that fast, how he knew to duck low and stay in my blind spot. Doesn't explain the footage vanishing like it never happened. No ghosts, no shadows in the fog, just a man who shouldn't have been there, and me driving with my eyes always locked on that mirror, waiting for a shape to crawl out of the dark again.